discretionary development charge exemptions through Report FCS 24017 that phases the funding over a longer timeline and leverages additional operating budget surplus to reduce the immediate tax impact in 2024 by $6.5 million or 0.54%. Therefore, be it resolved that the recommendations in Report FCS 24002 respecting the proposed 2024 tax-supported budget and financing plan be amended to reflect a reduction of $6.5 million to the financing strategy for discretionary development charge exemptions per that report. Okay.
Councillor Cassar, would you like to speak to your amending motion?
Yeah, just very briefly, we absolutely need to make up for the underfunding and discretionary exemptions and other things like capital. That's a separate topic, though, from previous years. This was identified as an opportunity since we are in an unprecedented year, starting at 14.2, getting down to 7.9, and now lower than that. It made sense that we relook at that strategy since we're already paying it over a long period of time, how we might reduce the burden because we've heard that all loud and clear this year. We need to reduce the burden in 2024, and this is a responsible way to do that.
Thank you, Councillor. Going to our speakers list, I have Councillor Wang, followed by Councillor Clark, and I do have a quick question myself. Councillor Wang, please.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, just a question probably to staff. This is all under the assumption of today's existing DC exemption strategy, and this is a potentially a 50% sort of strategy to pull from reserves. I just want to get that clear. Is that correct?
So through the chair, with respect to the budget's assumptions, we did assume with respect to the ongoing DC stakeholder conversations and lead up to this year, the approval of the DC bylaw, a partial decrease, a 50% decrease in the change of DC discretionary DC exemptions. So yes, maintaining those DC exemptions, but given the magnitude and the size of the impact, is capturing only a partial increase of those DC exemptions. And so that will be subject to the outcomes of the DC exemption deliberations surrounding the bylaw. With respect to this amendment is, in the past, our strategy with respect to development charge liabilities is through our year-end report. If we have a capital financing surplus, we've applied a portion of the capital financing surplus towards these development charge liabilities. And so the amendment that's before you today through the motion is the continuation of that. In recognition, we are forecasting a capital financing. We had assumed $10.5 million already into the 2024 budget and an additional $2 million from 2023 year-end capital financing surplus. And with respect to the balance of the amendment, recognizing 2024, it represented a $62 million expenditure cost. That was a 300% increase relative to 2023. So again, this is a sustainable strategy in that it defers those investments to latter years. So effectively, we're extending the financing strategy and capturing those increases in future years.
Councillor?
Yes. I think the crux of where I'm asking this is that next Thursday we'll have an AFA meeting, Audit Finance Administration meeting, where we will be talking about the new DC exemption. So this motion, essentially in its current form, will hold up given the eventuality of a new DC exemption bylaw. Is that correct?
Through the chair, we've made some assumptions, and we think they're conservative assumptions. However, subject to the deliberations through the development charge bylaw, is we would capture any impacts of those discussions. But I think maybe what the councillor's referring to is the conversation has to be fluid in that we need to continue to share in terms of what's in the budget relative to what's being considered through the committee's deliberations on the development charge exemptions. so that committee is aware if there's alignment relative to the budget or whether or not any decisions on DC exemptions may create some relief relative to what's in the budget and ideally not creating additional pressures relative to what's in the budget.
So Chair, the short answer is yes, this will be fluid enough that and nimble enough that it can also weather and be accounted for the new DC bylaw. That's all I'm asking. Is it a yes or a no? What's the short answer?
Through the chair, yes.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, GM. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor, and you can take me off the speakers list. My question is asked and answered. Councillor Clark, followed by Councillor McMeekin and Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. So not to belabor the point that Councillor Wang was making, as I'm reading this, it appears to me that it is changing how we address discretionary development charge exemptions outside of our discussions with stakeholders on setting the new development charge. Is that what we're doing?
Through the chair, this decision isn't predetermining the discussions around development charge exemptions. This effectively is just the financing strategy as it relates to development charge discretionary exemptions. And subject to those deliberations, which are scheduled to conclude in June of this year, as we would report back with respect to the outcome of those deliberations regarding discretionary exemptions. So again, this does not predetermine what those discretionary exemptions may be, how they may change. It's effectively the funding of the development charge exemptions. And again, subject to those deliberations, if there is a material change whereby this financing strategy requires amendment, that would be in 2025. And again, ideally, it would be an amendment that reduces the reliance in terms of impact to taxpayers rather than increasing the reliance on taxpayers.
So to summarize, we are changing the financing strategy for discretionary development charge exemptions. We're doing it in 2024. The new development charges bylaw, which will include discretionary exemptions, will not be approved and in force until 2025. Therefore, any changes that are made by that committee in recommendations to this council and by this council, they could still correct any changes that may not be congruent with what we're doing here today.
Through the chair, yes, with just one small amendment to that statement.
Those small amendments.
It's the development charge rates would come into effect in June of this year. So again, with respect to this strategy, so recognizing this strategy is a combination of taxes and reserves.
Yep.
So we can always adjust in terms of the reliance on reserves, either reducing reliance on reserves if we find we were overly conservative in terms of the development charge, the cost of the development charge exemptions. And then staff would come back in 2025 to report that the base funding is sufficient. We could defer a further tax increase in 2025. Alternatively, if there requires us to approve some additional funding because of those development charge deliberations, we will report back likewise in 2025. So Councillor Clark, you're correct. It's just that the effective date of the next DC bylaw is June of this year. That's the only change.
And we're not prescribing to that committee how they're going to do their recommendations to council, nor are we prescribing it to council in their future decision. Yeah. Correct?
Through the chair, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McMeekin, followed by Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Chair Danko. It's been said that we always need to remember that all things are connected. And to Councillor Clark's point about one driving or not driving the other is of particular importance. Given my belief, particularly on the industrial commercial side, that we need to be really careful and sensitive around the development charges, lest we become uncompetitive to the point of losing the very kind of development we need to foster. So I guess my question to the bench, and I don't have a crystal ball, and maybe the director doesn't either, but given that potential connectedness, are we, and we maybe won't know until what, the 22nd, when we have that discussion. So I'm being completely transparent and referencing that as an unknown. Is it our goal in looking at exemption or non-exemptions to buttress a situation where we are inherently more competitive, or at least as competitive as our neighbors? That's my question.
So through the chair, maybe if I can just focus the conversation just in terms of the financing today is Councillor Makepeace, those really are discussions for February 22nd at AFNA and subsequent discussions. The purpose for today is just the financing strategy as it relates to those outcomes. So what we've captured is not only historically what our experience has been with respect to exemptions, but again, the legislative changes around, for instance, Bill 23, and we've made some assumptions with respect to discretionary, and those are local decisions. Discretionary are the local development charge exemptions. So again, the purpose for today is improving in terms of the sustainability of that financing strategy for development charge exemptions. And through this motion, we continue to have a sustainable financing strategy. The decisions with respect to incentivizing exemptions, that is a February 22nd AFNA discussion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jackson.
Budget Chair Danko, I don't know if you outlined this at the beginning of today's meeting, but I would like this, please. Some kind of a budget thermometer or a graphic that shows, I think we left off 11 days ago. Memory serves me right at 6.9% with a series of these recommendations. Could I humbly ask, after we deal with each one, staff can quickly tell us, is 6.9 now at 6.7? That would be very important to me to ultimately see at the end of the day where we might be. Is that possible, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Mike and his crack team of bean counters are on it. Thank you. I see no further speakers, so item 7.1A, we will go to the vote. Moved by Councillor Cassar, seconded by Councillor Kretsch. Tax budget amendments to the discretionary development charge exemptions, representing a saving of $6.5 million, approximately 0.54% off of the tax levy. That carries unanimously. Moving on to item 7.1B, the 2024 tax budget amendments, litter management service enhancements. This is moved by Councillor Wang and seconded by Councillor Kretsch. Councillor Wang, please introduce your motion.
Thank you, Chair. Whereas Council recognizes affordability concerns in the community given the recent periods of high inflation and rising interest rates, whereas the proposed 2024 tax budget recommends enhanced proactive and reactive litter management in the public realm citywide, whereas report PW 23076 provided a recommendation and 2 alternatives for consideration, whereas the total operating impact of the recommendation is $2.4 million, whereas on January 30th, 2024, through an amending motion 7.1A General Issues Committee budget, directed the staff to report back with the details of the new alternative 3, detailed in report PW 23076A, litter management service enhancements with cost implications in the 2024 budget, which, if approved, will prioritize downtown enhancements, expanded street sweeping in the business improvement areas, broadened litter collection in parks and trails, and the ability to promote and support volunteer cleanup groups. And whereas the overall operating impact of Alternative 3 is $0.8 million, resulting in a tax operating reduction of $1.5 million. Therefore, be it resolved A, that the recommendations in report FCS 24002 respecting the proposed 2024 tax-supported budget and financing plan be amended to reflect the litter enhancement strategy to alternative 3, as described in report PW 23076A, resulting in the reduction of 1.63 million and 17 full-time equivalents to the 2024 net levy amount and inclusive of the following revisions. 1, that the 2024 council-referred litter collection service level review, PW 23076, be revised to include a total of 10.96 FTEs, an operating budget of $747,000 in 2024, a capital budget of $575,000 to be funded from the waste collection fleet replacement project, and an additional operating impact of capital of $83,800 in 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Did you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, in my motion, it doesn't exactly say the percentage, so I'll have to ask GM Zagaric and his mathing to help us. But yes, this will be a net reduction in our overall tax levy. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you.
Through the chair, point 1, 4 beans.
Thank you, Councillor. Discussion on this item. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a clarification in the motion. So item A says a reduction of 17 full-time equivalents. And then item AI says revised to include a total of 10.96. So we're dropping 17 and we're picking up 11. Is that the correct way I'm reading this to GM Zagaric?
Thank you. Through the chair, Angela Surrey, Director of Waste Management. So it reads that way, Councillor Clark, because the original recommendation was 27.96 and the alternative number 3 is 10.96. So the difference is 17.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor. Not seeing any further discussion on this item then, so moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Kretsch. Item 7.1B, the 2024 tax budget amendment for litter management service enhancements, realizing a total savings of $1.5 million and 0.14% reduction in the tax levy. All in favor or opposed? That carries unanimously. Moving on to item 7.1C, tax budget amendment to the Hamilton Apartment Rental Program. This is moved by Councillor Nan and seconded by Councillor Alex Wilson. Councillor Nan, please.
Sure, through you, Chair. Whereas staff were directed to review the Hamilton Apartment Rental Program inclusive of the Tenant Support Program, the Safe Apartments Bylaw, and the Renovation License and Relocation Bylaw programs, and report back on any opportunities for 2024 tax levy savings from the coordinated and staggered implementation of the program. Therefore, be it resolved, A, that the recommendations in report FCS 24002 respecting the proposed 2024 tax-supported budget and financing plan be amended to reflect the revised implementation plan for the Tenant Support, Safe Apartments Bylaw, and Renovation License and Relocation Bylaw programs, resulting in a 1.390623, so $1,390,623 decrease to the 2024 net levy amount and inclusive of the following revisions. So one would be capital project 45024510001, licensing bylaw vehicles, Safe Apartments renovations bylaw waterfront, gross amount be revised to $272,625 in 2024 and $572,250 in 2025. 2, that the 2024 council-referred item renovation license and relocation listing bylaw PED report 23072 staffing request be revised to include a total of 3 FTEs, resulting in a net expenditure of $132,800 for 2024, $271,200 for 2025, and $281,100 for 2026, and finally $291,400 for 2027. And 3, that the 2024 council referred item Safe Apartment Buildings Bylaw PED Report 23072 be amended as follows. 1, that the revenues not earned up to 87% cost recovery during the implementation period of the Safe Apartments Bylaw be funded from the Tax Stabilization Reserve 110046. This is estimated at $490,000 in 2024, $1.7 million in 2025, and $1.1 million in 2026. And 2, that the phased-in hiring of a total of 25 FTEs during the implementation period spanning from 2024 through to 2026. This represents a net $92,600 this year, $253,100 in 2025, and $404,000 in 2026 and beyond. And finally, that the 2024 council referred item HSC 23023B tenant support program be revised to include a total of 4 FTEs, resulting in a net expenditure of $810,000 for 2024 and $1,079,000 for 2025 and beyond, and that the associated capital investment of $50,000 be removed. And through you, Chair, what this amending motion enables council to do is remain committed to using every municipal lever available to the city to help improve housing security for our neighbors who rent. It goes on to support those urgently facing bad faith evictions, and also goes further in preserving affordable housing units across our municipality. But it does so at a revised timeline that enables a $1.4 million savings to this year's tax levy impact. And with assurances to all of our neighbors that it still enables all the good work that is inside the bylaws to take place. It just means a 6 to 8 month staggered out end date in terms of completion of the program. So it's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Alex Wilson. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nan. And just before we go to discussion, so we can all keep track, the $1.4 million in savings as a percentage?
Through the chair, these amendments translate into a reduction of 0.12%.
Thank you. So opening for discussion, Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you. And every bean we save is another bean in the bank. Just questioning on FTEs, and I know I'm belaboring this, and I apologize, but I am concerned. We're shooting for higher than another 200 FTEs this year, over and above the 200 that we hired last year. So when I'm reading this, it says that 2024 will have a total of 3 FTEs. Then it says 25 FTEs will be phased in during the implementation from 2024 to 2026. And then it says an additional 4 FTEs. So this program is really going to have 32 new FTEs by the end of this term.
So through the chair, 32 by 2026, yes.
Yes. So you're not saying the beginning of 2026, you're saying by the end of 2026.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Alex Wilson.
Thank you. I've seconded the report, supportive of the motion today. I do just want to, and I want to start by thanking staff for all the work to kind of find this compromise and move this forward. I often speak about emergencies around this table, and I often speak about how by acting proactively and sufficiently in the moment, we can prevent and be proactive and prevent future harm from happening both economically, but also to real members in our community. I have serious concerns about taking this from more of an emergency scale response and kind of sitting it into something a little bit more, well, we can make this happen. Again, this is also much more workable for staff. It's more than just savings. This is also operationally supported by staff, and so I am supportive, but I do just want to kind of caution the logic of always trying to find that bean or find that dollar, to kind of borrow a phrase, because these are dollars being invested to keeping tenants homed. We know we have costs associated to housing and homelessness. I think regardless of the scale, tenants and renters' rights are worth investing in. I've heard from colleagues that this is the proposal today that's workable, and I hope that we can move forward with that. But I do just want to put that out there that I think it's always worth investing in keeping people homed. It's always worth investing in housing as a human right. And it's always worth, when we are in an emergency and we declare emergencies, looking at how we are having an emergency level response. But I appreciate, again, all of the work that's gone into this and how Hamilton remains a leader in this space and continues to be a leader in this space. As always, and I think with anything, I would always love to be doing more. But I want to thank especially Councillor Nan for years and years of work on getting us here, working with tenants, bringing their voices into this chamber. And so this work could continue collaboratively between our staff and between community members. So thank you for that, supportive of these recommendations, and investing in tenants is just that, an investment.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further speakers, we will go to the, sorry, Councillor Clark.
So to be clear, we're really talking about the 3 FTEs for this term, and then as the program unfolds, we will finalize and confirm how many FTEs we actually need to hire during the coming couple of years. This is not saying that, okay, we're going with 3 and then next year we're automatically hiring 30 FTEs, whether we need them or not.
So through the chair, I'll get Mike to confirm that I've got this correct, but with this approval, we'd be building those FTEs in that phase-in period into the maintenance budgets that we would bring forward each year. Of course, if in year we find that revenues are higher than anticipated or there's adjustments that are needed, we can do that. But the multi-year budget would assume that these FTE counts are built into the maintenance budget each year. Of course, those maintenance budgets do have to be approved by council each and every year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kretsch?
Thanks. I want to echo the same things that, some of the same things that Councillor Alex Wilson said, and thank Councillor Nan for leading on this work for a number of years. It's not easy work to do. I would say that when I've spoken to residents since I've been a councillor, the media, town halls, here even, actually to my colleagues, people have been shocked to learn how many tenants actually live in the city of Hamilton. Routinely, when I say 77% of the people who live in Ward 2 rent their homes, people are astounded by that figure. The next lowest figure down is in the 50s. But that's more than 200,000 people in our city, 34.3%, rent their homes. We know pretty conclusively that the series of bylaws and laws we've developed as a city since 1813 to now have predominantly focused around property ownership, period. And that's the basic foundation we're here from as a council in this term with, is that legacy. Yeah, it's going to be some heavy lifting to try and start to balance that framework out so we can represent that third of a population who I would say now are forced to rent their homes, forced to rent those homes unaffordably, unsustainably, and without the support that they need. So thanks for this work. I support it. There's going to be a lot more work to do to bring balance to this conversation. I'm grateful that we can get behind that work as a city and lead in the province as a city to get this work done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kretsch. So no further speakers. So item 7.1C, tax budget amendment to the Hamilton Apartment Rental Program, moved by Councillor Nan, seconded by Councillor Alex Wilson, with a $1.4 million in savings, representing a 0.12% decrease of the tax levy. All in favor or opposed? That carries with 14-0 with 2 abstentions. Good job for remembering. Moving on to item 7.1D, the 2024 budget amending motion for replacement of 2018 diesel waste packer equipment Councillor Beatty is moving this, seconded by Councillor Francis. Councillor Beatty?
Thank you, and through you, Chair, I'll read out the motion. Whereas Council recognizes affordability concerns in the community given the recent periods of high inflation and rising interest rates, and whereas the proposed 2024 tax budget recommends the replacement of 9 diesel waste packer units with compressed natural gas at an additional cost of $1.89 million, and whereas on January 30th, 2024, Council, through the General Issues Committee budget, directed staff to report back on the cost implications of the 2024 budget of replacing the current block of 9 diesel waste packer units in a like-for-like manner, and the removal of the additional $1.195 million expenditure to replace 2018 diesel waste packer equipment with compressed natural gas equivalents and fueling infrastructure as required. Therefore, be it resolved that the recommendations in report FCS 24002 respecting the proposed 2024 tax-supported budget and financing plan be amended to reflect a change in financing strategy for the replacement of the compressed natural gas waste collection trucks, with $597,500 being funded from the Climate Change Reserve, number 108062, and $597,500 from the unallocated capital reserve 108020, resulting in a $1.195 million reduction in the 2024 capital budget per report PW 24009, and that those savings be directed to offset the projected 2024 tax levy increase.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to your motion, Councillor?
Certainly. First, my thanks to Director Angela Story for the continual back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and trying to land this in a productive way, and also to GMs Can, Zagaric, and Thorne for finding a solution that met with the least amount of consternation, I think, amongst my colleagues. The original plan that I had proposed was to continue to replace like for like with diesel equivalents. How do I put it? They trashed that idea. Pardon the pun. Some of my colleagues raised some concerns about deviating from the current plan, which replaces diesel with CNG, compressed natural gas. You'll recall that my original intent was a pause to explore the options that would come available in the next cycle of replacement, including hybrid electric and possible hydrogen-powered vehicles at that time. That wasn't palatable. I hope that this direction is. And I will say, just overall, Chair, a level of frustration at the level of work that's gone into trying to accomplish this. I don't think I've ever worked so hard and seemingly achieved, on paper at least, very little. So a degree of frustration on my part, and just voicing my opinion on that, Chair, but hopeful that I would see support for this moving forward, because I do think that trying to find savings for our taxpayers, that's what we're trying to do here. And as has been noted, every bean counts in this, and this is 1.195 million beans that will be taken off of the levy increase, and I think that's important. So I'm happy to move the motion. Thank you to my seconder, Councillor Francis, and hoping for support.
Thank you, Councillor. Again, just before we go to debate, if staff can confirm the 1.195 million reduction from the tax levy would be representative of?
Through the chair, 0.1%.
0.1%. Okay. And Councillor Jackson, if I'm counting, it's right about 6%, pretty close, right on. Assuming this is approved. Anyway, we'll go to Councillor Huang, followed by Councillor Kassar. Councillor Huang.
Chair, I want to thank Councillor Beatty for listening, because I think that we've had an opportunity to really speak really in passing in the hallways, and all of the work that goes into this is really hard work. And again, I think that being able to go through a budget book that's like literally 4 inches thick and having Post-it notes and highlighters, and I would say that every single councillor here has been really sharpening their pencils on how to make this work. And I really appreciate all of my council colleagues for the amount of work that we're doing. This is fiscally prudent. We are working hard on ensuring that service levels are kept exactly the same. We are also making sacrifices by seeing service levels change, but they still have to reflect a growing community. So I'm thankful to this council, and I'm thankful to Jeff Beattie for the amount of work that he's done on this. So I'm very happy to support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wang. Councillor Kassar.
Yeah, also pleased to see the change in direction as Councillor Beattie outlined. I do have a question though about the funding sources here split between capital, unallocated capital reserve and the climate change reserve. I know that we have set up a climate change reserve under the leadership of Dr. Lukasik. And we also have said repeatedly that climate change is something that the entire company needs to work into their plans. And I know the GMs are all doing that. And that the climate change fund would be for activities and initiatives up above and beyond that. So curious on the choice here to use the climate change reserve for this motion because it's part of the plans that were already in place. So I guess the direct question would be, why does this need to be split half into the climate change reserve and not entirely into the other one? Through your chair.
So through the chair, I can start in terms of speaking about the climate reserve. So this is a reserve, as council knows, was set up, I guess, about 2 years ago. And its purpose is to fund new initiatives, new programs related to implementing the city's climate action strategy, testing out new technologies, trying out new pilot projects, things of that nature. So I think in terms of the trying out a new technology, this would fit within that overall mandate and intent of the climate reserve. I could, in terms of the available funds in that reserve, based on previous year's commitments and carrying forward some unspent dollars, there are some existing programs that have already been approved or committed, and there is in the budget that's in front of you today an additional $2.5 million investment into that reserve. Estimate is that the available balance in 2024 would be about $3.5 million. This investment would reduce that to about $2.9 million. And then much like she did last year, Dr. Lukasik, after doing some consultation internally with the city staff as well as with the new advisory committee, would be bringing forward a report and some recommendations later this year for recommended investments for how to invest the remaining funds in that reserve.
Okay, thank you for that, GM Thorne. I'll reflect on that.
Councillor Alex Wilson.
No, my question was just what's in the reserve. I think we got that answer. Reflecting on it, similar to Councillor Kassar, but I'll say that earlier when the climate committee wasn't here, growing green being a priority, we were able to use the climate reserve to accelerate the NAI. I hope as we have the natural areas inventory project, I hope as the committee gets going, more of this work is being directed by that committee. At this time, I'm also reflecting on I'm someone as a council member who's allocated funding from the climate reserve to a project that needed to get going and needed to get started. Just seeking, I think maybe the only final point of clarification there is the use of the climate reserve, because this is a new technology, as my understanding is we already have 10 of these on order. Just kind of trying to understand that distinction.
GM Thorne.
So through the chair, yes, I recognize that. I think what we've identified though in the reserve is, where there's an opportunity to make an additional investment to achieve additional GHG reductions, that would be an appropriate use of the reserve. Ultimately, it's up to this council in terms of how you want to invest those funds, but certainly there would be a climate benefit of converting from diesel to the CNG vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Vice Chair Wilson. Just two questions. And notwithstanding the money that we're spending as a part of the climate change program under Dr. Lukasik, Are we also tracking all of the changes that we are making as a corporation that will help us lower our GHG? Surely we're not simply saying, well, that's all we're doing in that climate office over there, because we were starting the process before that office was created in terms of changing how we do business. So are we tracking that? Do we have a Chair, you're back. A running tally?
So through the chair, absolutely, and that is, so the annual report that Dr. Lukasik would be bringing every October would be a report on what those initiatives are, how they're helping us to advance our climate strategy, achieve our target GHG reductions, and it's not limited to only initiatives that happen to be funded by this reserve or only initiatives that are delivered by the Climate Change Office. It's a whole of corporation report and also a whole of community report, because Council recalled the climate action strategy isn't just about city actions, it's about whole of community actions.
Yes, absolutely, and that's a very valid point. Can I also get clarification, because I'm sure it's going to come up sometime later this year. The Climate Change Office with their advisory committee will come forward with a number of initiatives to assist us in lowering greenhouse gas. And there's a wide breadth in terms of what they can consider. When they come forward, those are recommendations to GIC and then subsequently council. It doesn't mean that they're approved simply because they are bringing forward that report. We still have to deliberate and make the decision. Is that clear?
Through the chair, that's correct. There'd be a recommendation report come forward with those recommended investments, and it would be up to council to approve or not approve each item.
Thank you. And notwithstanding this issue, if you could put me on the agenda subsequently before we have the main vote, I do have a couple more questions about the overall budget, if that's feasible.
Yep, after we finish all the amending motions, we will move on to the main budget as amended.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Taddison?
I just wanted to say that I had some conversations with the mover yesterday, and climate change reserves 100% on this. I have no question about this. We have to consider where we are, where we want to go, but we have to realistically look at where we are now and move slowly. We can't just go from here to there like we're going through a wormhole. For me, when I look at comparing it to the diesel, some of the things that I was looking at were like, this is a much cleaner fuel. There's no sulfur, particulate matter, traces of heavy metal or toxic additives. It's 44% lower hydrocarbons. Carbon monoxide is reduced by 80%. And we save $500,000 a year in fuel with this. So congratulations and thank you for seeing the advantages, and when we spoke about the climate impact of maintaining diesel, even if it was for the short term to get to where we need to go, this helps us bridge that gap, and I'm all about bridging that gap. We're not going to get anywhere if we just hold out and hold out and hold out. We need to make moves that reflect our climate change policies, but we also have to be realistic in how we get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mayor?
No, I'm good.
No, okay. So no further speakers then. So it's moved by Councillor Beattie, seconded by Councillor Francis. Tax budget amendment, replacement of 2018 diesel waste packer equipment, amending motion as revised, representing a savings of $1.195 million, 0.1% from the tax levy. All in favor or opposed? And that carries unanimously. So we do have one additional amending motion. This is going to be moved by Mayor Horvath and seconded by Vice Chair Maureen Wilson. Mayor Horvath?
Thanks very much, Chair. It's a very simple motion, and it reads, so it'll be E, I guess, on the agenda, that subsection AI to report FCS 24002 be amended by decreasing the net tax levy to 719.1 million.
Thank you, Mayor. Any discussion on this amending motion? Sorry? Okay, no discussion. Okay, it was moved by Mayor Horvath, seconded by Councillor Vice Chair Maureen Wilson. Do we have the text?
The second part's not necessary. Well, yes, I'll share. If you want it to share, it's fine. Whatever the finance folks think is more appropriate.
Through the chair, that's appropriate. What's on the screen right now, that's appropriate.
Okay. Clear? Good? Okay. We'll go to the vote. All in favor or opposed? That carries unanimously. So we have concluded all of our amending motions. Before we move on to the main staff report as amended, maybe I could just ask staff to give us a thermometer update of our current position.
Through the chair, when staff presented the staff proposed 2024 tax budget, we presented a tax budget requiring approximately a 7.92% residential tax increase to support the proposed budget. Council has made a few decisions prior to today, and those are reflected in the revised amended recommendation report before you. With the additional adjustments this morning, that 7.92 proposed position now represents a 5.79% residential tax increase. The 7.92 represented an impact of about $382 per household. The current position represents a reduction of approximately $100 for a typical household, bringing it to approximately $286 for a typical household.
Thank you. So with that, we will open up discussion on the budget as amended. I'm starting to see our speakers list grow. First is Councillor Clark.
So can I clarify, are we asking questions right now and then we're voting or making comments on the budget, or am I supposed to combine everything together?
If you have questions, now would be the time. If you have comments, I'll leave that up to you if you want to make those now or go back on the speakers list for a second time.
The only reason I'm asking is the budget has been moved in, it's on the floor, we are making amendments. So if I ask questions about it now, then we go to the main motion as amended for that vote with comments. So can comments happen there and questions now?
Certainly, we can do it that way. That's probably a cleaner process. So questions and then open up a new speakers list for comments.
Thank you. I only have one question, and it's on the 2025 to the 2027 multi-year outlook. And I'm looking at page 298 of 298 of the big budget book. And so when I'm reading it while our staff are finding the page, it shows that the 2025 tax increase is projected at 7.9%. Then in 2026, it's projected at 6.4%. And then in 27, it's projected at 4.6%. And then, of course, where we are today, which is roughly 5.8%. Do the changes that we have made, and I understand how we're projecting that out, it's both a question of utilizing the reserves, so we're spreading out, basically financing the increase in spending from this year to out years. I get that. What I'm trying to understand is how does it correlate when we make final changes to the 2024 budget? Does that then, I hate to use a term from Ronald Reagan, trickle on down to the rest of it?
Through the chair, some of the adjustments that committee deliberated on today are financial adjustments that do represent phase-ins of the investments.
Yes.
And so consequently is adjustments that defer some of those phase-ins or requires a phase-in of those investments will have impacts on future years. So with respect to our preliminary position, for instance, in 2025, we were projecting a residential tax increase of about 7.7%, and this would amend that forecast to approximately 8.07%, so an additional 0.3%. And for 2026, likewise, but a smaller adjustment from 6.4 to approximately 6.5, so an adjustment of about 0.1. And for 2027, an adjustment from 4.9 to approximately 5.23%. And that is in part because of the development charge exemption phase-in for 2027. So yes, that some of today's decisions will impact future increases. But I also want to just highlight, these are forecasts for 25, 26, 27. And I'll try to illustrate that point is we assume, for instance, 1% assessment growth in those future years. This year we reported 1.9%. So there could be the opportunity and in terms of relief from these percentages if our assessment growth is in keeping with what we have realized the last few years, which is far greater than the 1% that we've traditionally forecasted.
Thank you for that. And the second question, Chair, is I understand that the Police Service Board entertained our request for them to review their budget. They have reaffirmed their position. When do we deal with the police service budget, or is it now just enveloped into the overall budget that's before us?
Through the chair, it is in the recommendation report. I'm just looking for the specific
A4.
recommendation.
A4.
Sorry, A4. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll look for that.
It's part of the boards and agencies recommendation. Okay. Moving on then. Councillor Kretsch, followed by Councillor Alex Wilson and Councillor Wang. Councillor Kretsch.
My question's about the pie. Not the proverbial pie from earlier in the meeting, but a different pie. I think you were being serious, Chair, when you put forward a motion to say, let's separate out the provincial amounts from other amounts. Like, I think that was a serious activity and gave some clarity to at least residents to reach out to me about, like, well, how is this all being split up? What's the municipally generated portion? What portion are we spending on housing homelessness? What portion would have been foregone to the hospital this year? And what portion would be coming from provincial downloads with respect to development charges? What I really want to see, hopefully when we get to council, or not right this moment, but my question is, can we see the pie breakdown? Because it's great to keep talking about the overall tax levy decrease, but I really want to know what the municipally generated number will end up being in the end. And if we could have it to 3 decimal places, it would be even better, because there was a bit of a rounding error last year where we were talking about 5.8 when it's really 5.9. I'd love to see those 3 decimal places after, so we have a kind of exact amount. Just the specificity people have been asking me for, so just asking for our staff to do the same thing. So not necessarily now, it's maybe a question, a leading question too, before the day ends, if we could have that pie breakdown, please, so we can report that properly. Thank you.
Through the chair, when we recess leading up to council, we'll work to provide staff with that breakdown in terms of those numbers.
Thank you. Councillor Alex Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. At the appropriate time, understanding that's not now, I would like to request a separated vote on the police services budget.
Okay, thank you. So I think we will conclude our speakers list for just general questions, and then we will have a separate vote on the police services budget component, final vote, comment, discussion on the final budget as amended. Councillor Spatafora and then Councillor McMeekin, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 questions for GM Zegeric. Just to confirm, on the future years budgeting that Councillor Clark was talking about, I believe 7.9 was one of the numbers talked about next year. Just to confirm, that includes 0 additional items. Council referred anything that's going to come up. So it's 7.9 before this council even puts 1 item forward for next year to deliberate in next year's budget cycle. Through you, Chair.
Through the chair, that's correct. It does not assume any unknowns in terms of any in-year decisions that may impact the 2025 budget.
Thank you. And my last question, and I don't know if you'll be able to provide this, property tax increase, we're talking around 5.8, I believe I heard, or 5.7. That will change for some residents based on where they live in the city? Is that correct, through you, Chair?
Through the chair, it'll impact residents differently in terms of principally because of tax policy and for area rating of services. And so this is the second year where there were some phase-ins of some changes to the area rating for fire. And so some property owners may see a incremental 0.8 and some property owners may see a reduction of approximately 2%, very similar to last year's experiences. So if property owners experience some of those shifts in 2023, they would experience similar shifts in 2024.
Thank you. That's good. Thanks, Jim.
Councillor McMeekin, please.
Thanks very much. We've all been working very hard at this, and I think the figures that are being spoken to reflect that. I just want to be clear, we're looking currently at a 5.79% increase. That, my quick math, Director Zegaric's better at this than I am, but that would reflect that 39.7% of that would be the provincial hit on that total based on the breakdown. I think that's something that needs to be flagged. I know, Chair, you've motioned that we flag that, and I think that's good because, as I've said before, I don't mind taking responsibility for the things we do, rightly or wrongly, in the eyes of whomever is viewing it. But I'm reticent to take the blame for something that we don't have any control over. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor McMeekin. So I'm seeing no further speakers on just general questions on the item 7.1, the budget report. So there's a request to break out the Police Services Board increase. So I believe we have some text on that specifically. So we'll put that up, and then I'll open the floor for discussion specific to the Police Services Board, and then we'll move on to the remainder. Councillor Alex Wilson?
Chair, I don't believe the motion's necessary. So I do have a motion ready if in the event that the police service budget fails, there's a hole to fill. And so I've done my work with staff to provide an alternative, but I don't need to move a motion if there's no gap to fill, would be my thought, if we're okay to have the vote first. And then I do have a motion ready to, if that's how you'd like to do it, just it may not be necessary depending on the outcome of the vote.
I think the intention right now is we're just going to break it out from the boards and agencies in total, because I think there'll be a different vote on the library and the other, the conservation authorities. So we'll have specific to the police board and then the remainder of the boards and agencies.
So there's no language.
So do we have the text for that, just to make sure that we... So that's specific to breaking that component out of item A4 just for the police board increase. And then we'll vote on the balance. Okay, so with that, I'll open up the floor to discussion on the police board recommended increase. Councillor Alex Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, I think there's a lot of comments that could be made, but I do want to be very narrow today. And I think what I'm putting forward. Last year, we had a conversation predominantly around conversations about violence in our communities, anti-Black racism, and some of those factors. And what I heard from a lot of colleagues around this table was the budget was not the time or place to address that. It's to work with relationships outside of that process. And so this year, I know individuals came forward with more financial facing pieces towards the Police Services Board. And also, I think there's been some feedback that may not have been the right process to go to as well. And so I'm moving this today and asking that folks consider voting no, not in the spirit of, I think, how it could be maybe construed or anything else, but just to say, like, what stance do we have? What power do we have? We have a responsibility under provincial law to ensure that there's adequate services and policing. How is that determined? What accountability is there? What rigor goes through? I think there's been long-standing concerns about this process. I know provincial parties have, for example, called for a complete overhaul of police oversight in recent provincial elections. I don't think this is a fringe position. I think people are asking for some accountability. And so the reason I think it is important to vote down this proposed budget today and instead propose an operating budget increase cap at 4% as we had requested is because I do think there needs to be some transparency in this process. And while this is not the way I would prefer to do transparency in this process, there's been attempts through every other way. And I think it's kind of, if not this, if not what's been tried by their folks, what is the way to pursue an accountability conversation with respect to the Hamilton Police Services budget beyond asking, is this your best work? Can we get something a little bit more rigorous than that? And I do think that work has been done at the Hamilton Police Services Board, and I think that will come out. But for me personally, I would like to continue raising the bar. And that's the spirit of this coming forward today. And I hope folks can understand that and consider it accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. On our speakers list, I have Councillor Nan, followed by Councillor Kretsch and Councillor Kassar. Councillor Nan.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Appreciating that this item has been lifted and separated out for a vote. And I just wanted to acknowledge that this term of council, one of our priorities is around enhancing our trust and confidence and transparency with our public. And, I will continue to say, why wouldn't we want to do better and be more responsive, not only in terms of our service delivery, but also do it in a way that enables and facilitates more trust with our public. And historically speaking, community input to public service, including police services, has been paramount in being able to create shifts that are necessary to address systemic flaws in the way that service has been delivered. I think of a really great and clear example as we think about the response to sexual violence and the number of cases that historically went unsolved in this city. And it wasn't until rigorous, multiple years of community input, stating facts, stating the number of cases that were going unsolved, that forced the service to make adjustments. And now, working in collaboration with community agencies, with survivors, we are moving forward towards excellence in public service as it relates to safety for women, non-binary, and trans folks. I can say the same when it comes to the Pride incident a few years back in Ward 3 at Gage Park. If it wasn't for rigorous, loud community input with very clear demands about what excellence in safety and well-being and policing looks like for those communities that are the victims, disproportionate victims of hate in our community, would not have happened without that public scrutiny. And unfortunately, those who are the victims of hate-based crimes having to continuously talk about the harm, the oppression, the trauma, and violence that they've had to endure in our streets. That kind of accountability is difficult to sit with. It speaks to the heart, speaks to the spirit, it speaks to our people, right? And so when this council made the decision to refer the police services budget back to the board to do a little bit more due diligence, it was with that spirit of saying that community has been speaking on the increased rate at which police servicing has been escalating as a municipal cost to our taxpayers. A wide diversity of residents have been writing in, complaining about the increase being not scrutinized. And as a committee, we sent it back with the hope of seeing some savings come back in earnest. Not as a political statement to say that we are against policing, not as a political statement to say anything other than this is a year in which we need every single public service to provide rigor to fiscal management and hear about the burden that our residents are enduring right now from a financial perspective. That was very clear direction, and I'm really disappointed that what came back to us is no change. And so I will be voting against approving this budget, and just want to reemphasize again that there is a lot of thanks to be given to our residents who consistently, bravely speak up and talk to us about how to make our public service more excellent, and that includes policing as well as every other public service that we offer as a municipality. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nan. On our speakers list, Councillor Kretsch, followed by Councillor Cassar and Councillor Clark. Councillor Kretsch, please.
Thanks. I'm happy to come back on the speaker's list to rebut any statements made, and I'll try to get this all on the record in 5 minutes or thereabout. These are my personal comments and views and what I've witnessed firsthand. It's a story of what it's been like to participate in the budgeting process of the Hamilton Police Services Board. It's not a nice story, and I'm not going to be diplomatic in telling it, but I will be honest and I will be factual in what I say. And I will belabor the point. A lot of labor went into the work so many in our community have done. To start, I remain the only member of the board at this table who has had a front row seat to every discussion, every suggestion, and every question along this process. I have fully participated in the process as far as the board would allow me, and I've taken my role seriously and responsibly. You all know me, and you know when I take something on, I put everything I have into it, and this was no exception. My story starts in November of last year when the Budget Committee still didn't have enough members to meet for its first meeting. We needed 3 members and we only had 2. Myself and the current vice chair, who chairs the Budget Committee, who had both been on the Budget Committee since 2022. In case anyone wonders why our first Budget Committee wasn't held sooner, I can tell you I and the vice chair tried, both of us, to get the Budget Committee started sooner. But until Dr. Menezes joined the board, there was no one who was willing or able, to be fair, to sit as a member of the Budget Committee. I'd like to make it clear to everyone here how absolutely inflexible I think the board has been about this. At its Budget Committee on December 1st, the final Budget Committee it held, the Budget Committee chair refused to allow the budget to be voted on. That's a fact. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. We didn't have a vote on the budget at the Budget Committee. It was, however, still sent to the city that day, later that afternoon, as the board's budget, despite the budget not being voted on by the board itself until 2 weeks later. Effectively, that meant that the board's budget, without board approval, was sent to the city. Although it was flagged as a draft only, hasn't changed since then. Between December 14th, when the board voted to approve the budget finally, and February 13th, a couple of days ago, when we held our special meeting, not a single discussion took place to reduce the budget. To that point, I think what IDEM did and what Dr. Menezes did demonstrates that we've been the epitome of responsible. I can assure you that Dr. Menezes and I did every single thing in our power to improve this budget outlook, and were fought by the rest of the board, none of whom proposed a reduction of 1 cent or otherwise stood with this council to make an attempt to reduce the budget. The board has had months to do this work and public meetings at which to raise it or impose its own mandate in line with the city's, but did nothing until we sent it back to them. And I think we sent it back to them with some seriousness when we voted on my motion to send it back 12-3. We were asking, really asking, for the board to do the work. And let me be even clearer. I think the Hamilton Police Service, including Chief Bergen, took this as seriously as they did in previous years. Very likely as seriously as General Manager Zagarek did. I think they both came into this process with their own efforts to keep the budget as low as possible. But that didn't stop us, as a council, from asking city staff if they could do more. The difference? The majority of this council worked together and with staff to make that happen. The mayor issued a directive, and this council issued a 4% mandate on the municipally generated budget. The big point? There was a mandate from this body, from the mayor and from this council to our city staff to direct them to reduce the budget. Naturally, there was a lot of collaboration as a result of the mandate. The police board, however, did not issue a mandate of any kind, and that's not my responsibility. I tried within the systems I had to get that to happen. But let's be clear, the board never issued a mandate to its staff to reduce the budget. A mandate plus a question plus a willingness to compromise equals an ability to collaborate. If the board is not willing to ask its staff to come back and reduce the budget, why should they? What incentive is there for them to do that work? That's an incredibly important part of this. The board refused to hold the service to a mandate, and this is our opportunity as the City Council to hold the police board accountable for that. Not the service, the board, for not doing the work we all did and putting it back to them to decide how to move forward. And they can still do the work if they wish. This is not just about today, but about ensuring that we have robust processes, transparent discussions, and more fiscally prudent police budgets in the future. Allowing this budget to stand as is, unchanged, since December 1st, will simply uphold the process I described and enable it to continue going forward. It will send the message that it's okay to put pressure on our staff, ask them endless questions, and demand that they come forward with reductions in the budget, but no one else. I ask you to vote down the current proposal from the Hamilton Police Services Board to allow another proposal to come forward today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. On our speakers list, I have Councillor Cassar, followed by Councillor Clark and Councillor Pauls. Councillor Cassar, please.
Thanks, Chair Danko. I don't have comments on the police service. Constituents in Ward 12 very much appreciate the police service. They've been very supportive to my office. This is definitely not about the service. I do have comments about the board and the process, though, and I've received lots of feedback from constituents about that. Yes, we want the police. We appreciate the police, would like more policing, but also very, very concerned about the cost. And similar to comments that have been made, this council did a lot of work, as did staff, to reduce the levy impact. If I'm doing the math today correctly, 1.3%, give or take, was reduced today. So I was very disappointed to see that when the police board reviewed the motions that were presented, nothing different came back. As Councillor Nan mentioned, leadership and police service is about trust and confidence, and I think we would all kind of agree that we need to continue building that, both from this council and the police service. So I think there's a missed opportunity here, and with that in mind, I won't support the budget as it is and look forward to supporting the amendment that will be coming forward if it does not pass. So thank you for the time to share that.
Thank you, Councillor Cassar. Councillor Clark, followed by Councillor Pauls.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask a couple of questions of staff prior to any comments? And my comments will be brief. I'm trying to understand, once again, the process as to how we deal with the Police Service Board budget. So my understanding is that the chief puts the budget together based on what he believes the service needs in order to provide the service that the municipality needs. The Police Service Board then reviews the budget and makes any determination. They send that budget to the city. The city then reviews that budget, and we make a determination as to whether or not we accept or reject or send it back. We sent it back. They've now kicked the ball back to us, so the ball's on our side now. What's the process from this period forward?
Through the chair, in order for the city to approve a 2024 budget will require some decision with respect to Hamilton Police Services 2024 budget. And so that would be a decision of council. Council could consider and approve the board recommended budget. Council could amend the board recommended budget. And those are options that council has. But again, in order to proceed with an approved budget and issue taxes, we would have to reflect a budget for Hamilton Police Services for 2024.
And so if we reject the budget as proposed by the police service, how do we represent that budget? As you indicated, we need to include it in our corporate consolidated budget.
Sorry, through the chair, if the councillor could repeat his question.
If this council rejects the police service board budget, they say, nope, not having that. But no further decision is made, what happens?
So through the chair, then we would not have a complete 2024 tax budget. And we need a complete 2024 tax budget in order to proceed. So some decision with respect to an allocation for Hamilton Police Services, a budget, would have to be decided upon by council.
So then if the council sets a different increase to the police service board, somewhat less, somewhat more than less, I'm not sure, and that forms as part of our consolidated budget, and then the police service board and the chief have a decision to make. Either accept that approved budget that we have provided or appeal it to the civilian commission.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you. I'll make a couple of comments.
Please.
I heard that we gave a mandate to the police for 4%. But I don't think we made that decision until late January. So they did not get a mandate of 4%. Our entire city staff didn't get a mandate of 4%. The mayor, utilizing her, I don't know what you call that, super mayor authority? You're super mayor, you get a cape now. We used our reserves and debt financing to minimize the impact per property taxpayers over a phased-in period of time. That's how we came down, and then ever since we've been, as my councillor Beatty, my cohort in Stony Creek has indicated, many hours crunching numbers to find a small amount of decrease in taxes. But we were all doing that. So I find myself in an awkward position because if we didn't tell the police service board what our expectations were until after the police chief and the police board made their budget decision, then it seems a little bit problematic for us to be trying to hold them to account on a cap that we didn't provide them. And all of this would play out if we now pass, and I may be getting ahead of myself, but if we pass a nominal amount, it will go to that commission, and we will need to present our case at that commission. And our case looks like the following. Did you increase spending in 2024 for the city? Yes. How much? 19.5%. Did you increase your taxes? Yes, 5.78%. Did you set a cap for your tax rate for your staff? No. Did you provide a cap to the police service board? No. And so you're saying no to the police chief, but you increased your spending by 19%. Granted, we phased it in over many years. I'm not disputing that. But he hasn't even come close to that increase in spending. And so I'm torn on this one, to be honest, because I can see what's coming down the road, and we will be, I think, challenged at that commission as to how we would argue that the Police Service Board should approve our rate of increase based on an arbitrary political number rather than an increase based on their needs in the community. So that's where I'm at. I hope to hear the rest of my colleagues around the table here, and my good friend to the left here was typing very quickly, so I don't think he was quoting me. I think he's got an idea and it's coming. I'd like to hear that. I'd like to hear what people think and where we are, and then we'll make our final decision. Thank you for the latitude. I appreciate that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Next on our speakers list is Councillor Pauls.
Thank you, and through the chairs. I just want to make it clear that my hands have been tied for the last year. Just now I'm able to speak on the police board. So I find it kind of insulting to say that my member colleague is the one that's doing all the work and nobody's willing to do the work. I wasn't able to do any work for last year and for the 4 years prior. So I just want to make that clear. Second, I want to make it clear that when the chief states that the Hamilton Police is constantly looking for innovative, fiscally responsible approaches to providing police services while effectively and efficiently making use of existing resources. I want you to know that the chief does not do his budget on a napkin, like people might think. He actually is well informed by the senior leadership team via their comprehensive budget submission based on complete, and I say complete reviews of the respective divisions, branches, units, and programs. And you know when it starts? After we pass this budget. Just like our city manager, when we pass this budget, you know what they do? They go to work. They go to work to see how they could efficiently run the city. The police chief has done a great job. And we have to stop. We really have to stop degrading or saying, oh, it's runaway train. The police budget is a runaway train. Let me show you this. That the Hamilton Police budget, from the sensible and reasonable viewpoint of inflation, specifically citing 2011, that the last time this body was asked to give the second thought to propose Hamilton Police Service budget. According to the Hamilton Police Service Performance and Inflammatory Analysis using the Consumer Price Index to assess what then 2011 budget, which was at $130 million, would be in 2024. Over 13 years, the CPI increased by 31.70, an annual inflammatory rate of 2.32 annually, while the 2024 CPI rate is projected by the bank at 3%. Factoring the CPI increase and assuming no FTE growth, the $130 million in 2011 would result to a $177.37 million in 2024 dollars. Now, In light of the city population growth, which requires increasing policing, strive for adequate cop to pop ratio, the 2024 police service budget is proposing a modest FTE growth of 2.36. Therefore, according to our math here, with inflation and FTE growth, 130 million in 2011 will translate to 207 million. Let that sink in. In 2024, it should be 207, which is actually 130,000 less than the budget of the board is bringing forward. It's pretty close. So 6.88 or $13.32 million. And we're adding the mandatory capital cost of, it'll be 8.47 and it will be 16 million. I just want to say that at the day, I want to be clear with you all, that the day on the 13th when we were talking, I find kind of hard to say, okay, let's reduce the cable TV. Do we have cable TV here? Let's reduce retirement events. I've been to those events. Some people are dedicated their life for 40 years. Some are 50 years. And we're not going to say and do anything about them. $19,000 it costs a year. Think of that. Also, the Hamilton Police website. Look at our system, how we change it all the time. Those nitpicking line to line is unacceptable because that's what the police access. If you're going to ask the police to reduce the budget, ask. Maybe you could reduce it $1 million, $2 million. They're the ones, they are the ones that do the budget, not us. We receive it, we look at it, and then we decide. I just want to say lastly, the most thing that I want to say personally, I've had people, I need a drink of water because this is very, it's been 5 years since I could talk about the police, so please give me some, I only get 5, I could go on the second time, okay? Well, actually 5 years worth of 5 minutes, how about that?
Okay, let's focus.
Not you.
I just want to say, well, I should be. Okay, I just want to say, the thing that I've got emails, it says about the mounted unit. Why should we spend almost $900,000 for the mountain unit? I want to tell you something. The mountain unit is like many police units, can be utilized in multiple ways. The unit's primary function is neighborhood policing, proactive patrols in high crime area, searches for missing and vulnerable people, and enforcement. But listen to this, but they are most valuable when leveraged as a community engagement tool, and that's what we need. Community engagement is the key to building trust and relationship with our community. I'll tell you a quick story, and I have to. I want to tell you that I helped with a fundraiser for the RCF, and there's for residential living. And the people that live there, there's about 55 of them, and we had a fundraiser, and it was over 200 people. You know, their number one request was, can we have the mounted police there? That's what their request was. And when they came, they were so proud. They stood there, they took pictures. That builds confidence. That builds confidence in policing. And that's what we must do. We must build confidence. We have confidence on our chief to look at the budget, to say this is what we need, and not nitpick line by line what we need to do. So I urge my counselors at the police board, yes, there's tensions. I felt it all the time. There is tension. I don't know where it comes from, but there's tension. But I'll tell you, my hands are not tied anymore, and I'm going to be speaking because our community, there was a poll. Our community said that 55% approved the police budget. 21% are upset about it, and the rest, it doesn't matter. So please, colleague, think about it. Let's approve this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pauls, and providing you quite a bit of a leeway with time there.
Thank you.
Thank
5
you.
years.
On our speakers list, I have Councillor McMeekin. I believe the mayor had a couple words, and then our second-time speakers, Councillor Kretsch, followed by Councillor Alex Wilson. Councillor McMeekin?
Yes, thanks, Chair Danko. We all know about tension. We have tension around this horseshoe from time to time. Not often, but occasionally, and we work it out. Sometimes we have to hammer it out, but we work it out somehow. We get there. We can disagree without being disagreeable, I think was what somebody quoted the other day, and I think that's a good way to approach issues. I'm going to support the budget. Let me state that up front. Let me tell you why. I think it's about trust. Maslow's first stage of human development is trust versus mistrust. And the fundamental question for me isn't about the budget. It's do we trust that a police service board works? Do we trust that the folks that we send there can have influence, or at least attempt to have influence? Maybe they don't have as much as some as they'd like. And it's about working to perhaps give direction. You know, Councillor Clark talked about it would be helpful if we'd given some direction to help guide the police services board. Whether they take it or not, I don't know. That's something that they would have to struggle with. That would be a tension that they would have to deal with. But the whole idea of rigor, a rigorous response, I think one of my colleagues mentioned that. The only opportunity we had, and I had, to talk about this was when the chief made his presentation. And notwithstanding the fact that on most days I'm a fan of policing services and the protecting and serving function and their mission statement. You may recall, Chair, that I asked first and foremost, is their mission statement still alive and well? And he said it was. And then I asked about training. Does it involve training? Are you looking at ways to train officers to scale down violence, to do a whole number of great things? I asked about the demographics and the growth in the community, particularly. I think I may have referenced in passing the Waterdown community and some of the plans there and some of the concerns. I tell you, I don't get letters from people in Waterdown. I shouldn't say don't get any. But most of the letters I get say, you know, for goodness sakes, you know, get us a police presence out here. We need it. I asked about partnerships deliberately. I mean, gosh, I'm a social worker by training. I get it. I know the importance of different strategies, different 911, different first responders. And I was delighted with the police chief's response to that. I think there were 5 different partnerships that he articulated, and he talked about a vision of developing more and working more creatively and usefully with potential community partners. I asked about what percentage of the budget was new, and it wasn't very much. Most of it was related to staff and WSIB and such. So given all of that, and given my fundamental trust in, perhaps misguided, I don't know. I mean, it's, yeah, you know, the only opportunity we have around this horseshoe is to ask questions, and we grilled that guy for 90 minutes when he was here. I remember that. We asked him some pretty tough questions, and I appreciated the pretty tough answers we got back. So I intend to support this budget. I do it without hesitation or reservation. I do it because I want to be able to trust the Police Services Board. It may need to be some improvements, some enhancements, and perhaps we can play a role in that. But for this moment in time, given what I know about the process that lies ahead if we turn this budget down, I think it's incumbent on us as a responsible council to move forward and to do so in support of our police services board, and their.
Thank you, Councillor. So on our first-time speakers list, I have Mayor Horvath, and then second-time speakers, Councillor Kretsch, followed by Councillor Alex Wilson. Mayor?
Thanks very much, Chair Danko. I'm not going to repeat some of the comments that I've made previously at the board meeting, but I do think it's important for the council to know, or the GIC Budget Committee to know, that there was no collaboration with staff in terms of the motions that were brought forward to the board meeting. And one of the things that's clear in the legislation, which is, I'm going to read the two pieces of the legislation, because Councillor Pauls mentioned the Act. Section 31(4) clearly states that the board shall not direct the chief of police with respect to specific operational decisions or with respect to the day-to-day operations of the police service. So you can't do indirectly what's prohibited in the Act directly. So my understanding is that was why those motions were not supported by the board, because the board knows what the restrictions are under the Act. I also want to say I have no idea of what's coming forward in terms of motions at this particular meeting, but Section 39(4) of the Act prohibits council from approving or disapproving specific items in the estimate. In other words, the estimate is what the budget. You know, we call them estimates at Queen's Park. But I just wanted to put that on the table so that people have an understanding of some of the restrictions that exist in the Police Services Act, and also to say that if those restrictions are things that folks have problems with, then it's the legislation that needs to change to address that. There are pieces of legislation, there are parts of the Act that are changing come April 1st, and we'll be getting some information about that particularly. I do want to conclude by saying, though, that there were some policy matters that were included in the motions that were brought forward at the board meeting, and I think that there's a great deal of interest in having further discussions about those possible policy changes or policy efforts, and wanted to share that with the council as well.
Thank you, Mayor. So one further first-time speaker, Councillor Jackson, and then we'll go to our second-time speakers.
Thank you, Budget Chair Danko. As a former member of the Police Services Board over the years, it was an honor and privilege to serve at that august table. And as a member of council, I've always, over the years, been more or less supportive of policing and police budgets that have come forward at this table. I believe overall, Budget Chair Danko, we have a safe city, but I want it to be even safer. And within our community of communities, I'll always fight for, on my East Mountain community, where I know overwhelmingly, the majority of the constituents I represent, they want more visible, proactive, community-based policing. And, you know, we live in a dangerous time, Budget Chair Danko. I couldn't even imagine myself wanting to be a police officer in the times of society that we live in right now. There's a level of respectfulness amongst the average person that seems to be waning, even though overall I believe our community admires and appreciates the policing that Hamilton Police Services provides in our growing city. Guns, gangs, narcotics, traffic safety, domestics, armed robberies, not to be depressing at all, but these are some realities that sadly in the last number of years, Budget Chair Danko, have increased. And from my standpoint on the East Mountain, quality of life issues are incredibly important. And where little things may start, some vandalism, some graffiti, stuff like that, that some may around this table consider minor, given some other parts of the city that are represented, I can tell you those quality of life issues end up developing, if not arrested in time, and proactively dealt with in time, can grow into something bigger that can cause problems, greater problems within a neighborhood and a certain area of our city. So I'm very supportive of when Chief Bergen and his deputies, Diodati and Hamilton, and the majority of the Police Service Board brought this budget forward. It's the police, and policing in our modern times is not an easy task at all. And so I like to give the benefit of doubt of support to those that offer to protect me, my family, my constituents 24/7, day in and day out. And also with regards to the animals that make up the Hamilton Police Services, both in the canine unit and in the mounted unit with the horses, they do incredible work. I just love the animals that do incredible work for investigations of what the canine unit does in terms of narcotics, the mounted unit in terms of crowd calming and crowd control. And often when I have a community event up in my ward and invite one or two of the mounted unit, I can tell you that the lineups by the children and the families is very, very long and enormous. And it's a way of families engaging with policing, because animals do that. I don't mean to sound overly simplistic, but animals do that amongst a crowd. And so, Budget Chair Danko, I am giving the chief, I think it's important that hopefully the majority of us today give the chief an endorsement in saying, in these modern times, keep up the good work and strive to even make our safe community even safer. Thank you, Budget Chair Danko.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. For a second time speakers then, Councillor Kretsch, followed by Councillor Alex Wilson. Councillor Kretsch, please.
Yeah, trying to continue to be clear here. I really did say that I know some people weren't able to participate in the budget committee discussions at the board. I said that, I used those words. I recognize that that's a reality. And to Councillor Jackson's points, it's not easy doing this job. It's not easy being a firefighter either, or a paramedic. Have you looked at their budgets? Fire's half the amount the police get. We spent a quarter of the amount municipally on paramedics. And their budgets are held to, I'll give you one example. Paramedics are being held to 3.9% this year. So when we're going to start talking about frontline services and about pressures on everybody and every department having to come forward and make their cuts and hold the line, everyone else is doing it. I really do think it's important to address what Councillor Clark said, because I think that when we speak to this issue of what the next steps are, what we might put forward and how that might work, and about some of the comments here that have been about the police service, this is about the board. The board, and I want to say this again because I think it's getting lost somehow, maybe purposely, a mandate never came forward from the board. On August 31st of 2023, the mayor put a directive down, and that directive was made public and everyone knew about it. It was sent off to everyone, including the police. The police board at that time, or any time after that, could have come forward with a mandate, didn't do it. So that's what I'm trying to say to people here, is that there was never, ever, ever a mandate from the board to its staff. There was one, though, a directive given to our staff at that time. And actually, they went away and then found additional savings. I don't want to get the timeline all muddied here. That's what happened. And I want to speak briefly to this idea that, I'm not a lawyer. Start there. I think that's important, right? We can all read from the Police Services Act the same. So I'll just read something to the record. The board shall submit operating and capital estimates to the municipal council. The board is responsible for those budgets, period. No, we cannot say to the chief, you must take these officers and put them here, you must disband the SHENA, but we can say you could have this much less. In fact, I keep hearing that suggestion, which I think is kind of funny. You could have this much less, and why don't we put that blanket motion forward? Please, someone put it forward. I've asked at the board for someone to put it forward when they suggested it, and I say it here. It's coming soon in a minute, actually. Here's a blanket cut, which is totally within the rights of the Police Services Act, not attacking a line by line over here, just saying this is the amount. They have the right to say, okay, or no thanks, and appeal it. But that gets to be a decision of the board. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with asking the board to follow through on this process and having a mandate? I'll tell you, I sat there and I witnessed all this stuff. So you want to talk about trust? I'm telling you, face to face, what happened. You don't have to guess. You don't have to rely on a conversation you had with the police chief. I'm telling you what happened as a board member and what the board did. So I'm asking for that trust to believe what I said to you today and believe what the process has been like. And if that process is anything like I described it, I don't know how anyone here could support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Second time speaker and our final speaker on the list on this item, Councillor Alex Wilson, please.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I just want to go back to what I said at the beginning. I'm bringing this forward in a very narrow capacity. I think this, to me, this is not about the chief, and I keep hearing the chief. It's really even less about this specific budget in front of us, and it's more so about governance. And what are, if this is safe and effective and adequate policing, what KPIs are being used? Is it just cop to pop ratio? Okay, then why are some of the things, that we're seeing in this budget that are not related to cop to pop budget there? Where's that explanation? Where's that justification? I think by voting no, we are saying, even though we have said it through motions, through directives, through votes in the past, we need to have a better relationship here when it comes to accountability. I agree with what other folks said about the importance of trust. I also think that trust is earned, trust is demonstrated. And if we don't have KPIs as to how we're measuring what safe and adequate policing are with our Hamilton Police Services Board, then I have concerns. Because we have a community and safety well-being plan. The city has put forward what our priorities are. And under the Police Services Act, because we've all been reading from it, it does talk about what is safe and adequate or adequate and effective policing. It talks about specific functions that have to be there. And then it also talks about how the chief can set priorities. Have we been given a memo as to what the chief's priorities are and how they're represented in this budget? I do think that it is very incumbent upon all of us to ask for more accountability in this process and to continuously improve how we're moving forward. I don't think this is about concern with the number in the budget. It's about a process concern and it's about good governance. And I want to keep saying that because it's going, it's going to be said differently, but I want to just keep saying that that's where this is coming from. It's about a concern in terms of where are these numbers coming from? How are we measuring success year over year? And are there any metrics that we're holding this budget to? Just any metrics whatsoever? And if so, what are they? I think those are fair questions, and I don't know that we will get there, unfortunately, without saying no today and suggesting a cap. So if it is appealed, we will then exactly be in that conversation, Councillor Clark, as you brought out, where we will finally get those metrics as to what is adequate policing in this local area. We will begin a conversation with our local HPS board in defining what those metrics are, how much it costs to do that, and we'll be on this way. Maybe it's the budget they've presented. Maybe that's what we go forward, but at least now we'll have metrics to measure. We'll be able to talk to community members about why this is the case, what are the definitions, and what are our provincial limits. Right now, it seems like it's untested waters, and it's gray, and it's murky. We're not sure. I'm okay to jump in. I think it's time to find that out, and it's time to kind of get that clarity personally. I understand, though, also that we're not united on this one, and so I'll kind of leave it there and appreciate folks' consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to call the question. We've had a good debate. I think we probably know where we all stand. Okay, thank you. So a vote yes is in support of the $13.32 million police budget increase, 6.88%. A vote in opposition is obviously opposed to that. As General Manager Zegarac stated, we do need to have a police budget in order to pass the municipal budget, but I understand that if the case is that this recommendation does not pass, then there will be an alternative motion that is possible to be brought forward at that time. Do I need a mover and a seconder? It's just part of the report. Okay. So all in favor or opposed? And that carries as a vote of 10-6. Thank you. So at this time, we're back to item 7.1 as amended. Does committee wish to take perhaps a half-hour break for lunch? And then we come back with our final wrap-up discussion? Or are we about ready to vote on the final budget?
So
Yep.
to the chair, we'll also need a separate vote on the rental property budget item, so I have that pulled up as well, if you're carrying on right now.
Do we want to take a break? Yes? Okay. So we will take a break for reconvene at 1:30. Moved by Councillor Kretsch, seconded by Councillor Nan. All in favor or opposed? That is approved unanimously, so we are recessed until 1:30. Ready to resume our budget meeting for February 15th, 2024. Everyone is back in the room, no longer hangry. So we've gone through all of the amending motions. We have our current position on the budget. We've had the vote on the police board increase. So at this time, we'll open up the floor on item 7.1 for any final discussion, comments, questions. Yeah?
Sorry.
Janet, did you have something to add?
Well, we just also need a separate vote on the rental property budget item. So we have that prepared when committee is ready to vote on the balance of A1. AI, unless there's other changes to AI.
Let's do that first.
Yeah.
And then the discussion will be on the balance of the report as amended. Okay.
Do committee wish to see that vote? Like, okay,
yes,
on the screen?
please.
Yes, okay. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. So this is due to conflicts on rental properties. We're going to have a separate vote on the rental property budget items. This is item AI1, that the introduction of the renovation license bylaw, safe apartment rental and tenant support programs representing a net levy of $1 million be approved. We don't need an independent mover and seconder. It's with the report. Okay, all in favor or opposed? Thank you. That carries 14-0 with 2 abstentions. So again, at this time, we'll just open up the floor for any final discussion, comments, questions on the tax-supported budget and financing plan to FCS 24002 as amended. And starting our speakers list, Councillor Kretsch.
Hooray. Glad we got here to this budget. I see a lot of reductions here, and I see, frankly, a lot of collaboration around the table from people who took this process seriously, came to do the work. And the mandate, I think, that we had from the mayor, which I want to say thank you for that directive, helped us get to this place of doing this. And thanks to the chair and vice chair for the work of changing the process. That was my #1 biggest comment coming out of our first budget, which really wasn't our first budget. It was the budget from the previous council, but that was my first time being part of that process. And I think all of my comments were around more clarity, better following of our procedural bylaws, fewer last-minute motions, so we can all feel like we're making a decision, eyes wide open. I think what we've demonstrated is that through this kind of process, with a mandate, and then the ability to have time to ask questions of our staff and have them get back to us willingly, there can be collaboration. And I think I've been happy to collaborate with Councillor Cassar, Councillor Huang, and bring forward motions with Councillor Taddison to try and do that and fully participate in this process. So I've taken advantage of it. I think it's been great. And I think we can't go so low that we get below inflation, get to the point where we start, I think, digging ourselves a new hole. I think, and I'll say it proudly again many times, we dug a hole for ourselves to fill over the last 20 years by approving budgets that went below inflation. When it gets down so low, we have to make up for those services eventually. Our city kept growing and it caught up with us. And now here we are left holding the bag, frankly, and we have to have this level of increase. No, I don't think anybody here feels good about that. I don't think anyone wants to go to our reserve strategy and say we're going to use 60% of our reserves in our first, uncommitted reserves in our first year and have an 85% reserve drawdown over the next 4 years from our uncommitted balances. But those are the political choices we were left with. What we've done in the face of that has been financially prudent. And I want to say to everyone here, you know, voting in favor of all these amendments seems like the majority did that. And then voting no on this budget, I think is disingenuous. I do. I think voting in favor of this budget is an important step to take here. So we can say we're happy with the process moving forward. We have made improvements. And we're looking forward to working together. If all that we're going to do is use our vote to withhold a no, so tomorrow we can play a game of let's have a little haircut, I think, again, not the way to go here. So I think it's very important for us to pass this budget and welcome anyone who's got comments to say them on the record instead of heckling from across the floor, Councillor Francis.
Okay.
Hey, I'm just calling it out. He's heckling. I'm not doing it.
Thank you, Councillor. On our speakers list, Councillors Clark, Jackson, Wang, and Francis. Councillor Clark, please.
Well, I was hoping this was going to be a much more amicable discussion today. Just a couple of observations that I have. We are increasing our spending in 1 year of 19.5%. That is a record. We did, as Councillor Kretsch has noted, a record drawdown from our reserves of $216 million, and that's ostensibly to offset future costs to property tax increases. So the mayor's position, it shrunk those numbers, right? The 2024 budget has an additional, I think it's about 160 now. It was 200 and some odd, but the full-time employees being added were about 165 new full-time additions. And that means that over 2 years, this council, if this is approved, will have increased our full-time positions by 370. Those are big numbers. I can honestly say that I am truly grateful for staff when I raised the concerns about how we can phase these FTEs in. You don't need to do it all in one fell swoop. You can spread it out because you're not going to hire everybody in June. You're going to hire people over a period of time into the third and fourth quarter. And so our staff did that. And so I'm very pleased that has occurred. I am quite frankly concerned about our property taxpayers taking on additional expenses because of the provincial government and the fact that they have been absent. I use my words carefully, absent in their funding support for homelessness, mental health, and drug addiction. For example, the province funds our homeless program in Hamilton to the tune of $29 million. That's a big number. Whereas the city's actual need exceeds $80 million. So accordingly, our property taxpayers are picking up the province's financial neglect of over $50 million. That's what this budget does. Hamilton's record increase in homelessness with over 1,800 houseless residents and 300 chronically homeless individuals, that's new to us. We've never experienced this before, ever. Homelessness was an anomaly, not to the numbers that we are now seeing. And I submit, diplomatically, that this seemingly insurmountable homeless crisis is the result of misguided provincial housing policies, like eliminating rent control, and then enabling landlords to increase rent without any restrictions once the tenant has left the building. This otherwise innocuous policy played a significant role in the staggering number of rent evictions. Think about it. The only barrier for a landlord to full market rent is the current tenant. If I can get rid of that tenant, I can charge 3-4 times what I'm charging now. That had a dramatic result, an increase in homelessness across the province of Ontario. It may have been an unintentional situation, but had they communicated with municipalities and heard stakeholders rather than just developers and landlords, they would have seen that there is a cause and effect. If you do this, this is going to happen. But they didn't give us that chance. I also remember this other promise. We're going to make you whole. I think that's the way he said it. We're going to make you whole. To all the municipalities in the province. Well, it would appear their definition of being made whole is now subjective, as the province is only providing 1/3 of the actual costs that were incurred through their legislative and regulated changes. So, as I stated before, we're still looking for the rest of that pie. You promised us that you would work with us. You promised us that you would make us whole. Making us whole means 100% reimbursement of the costs that you put on our property taxpayers. And Chair, they didn't put it on us, council. They put it on the property taxpayers. That's what they have done. And finally, I'm concerned about the out years that are coming. So, and I asked Mr. Zagarek earlier, in 2024, we're down to about 5.8%. In 2025, it'll be around 7.9%. 2026, around 6.4%. 2027, around 4.6%. Those are all approximations, because if we bring in more services, more enhancements, then those numbers will increase. So, in the 5 years from our election as a council to 2027, there will be an approximate increase in property taxes of 31%. I can't do that. I can't do that to the residents. I know many of them in my ward cannot afford it. I won't do it. So I'm glad we've made inroads on the budget. I've made encouragement in terms of where we could make inroads, but I opposed the 5.8% last year because it was too high, and we're back at 5.8% this year. And so I will graciously oppose it. I will not disparage my colleagues for what they're proposing to do at all. They're making intentional decisions. They feel that there is a need for additional services in a significant area. And so they're doing it all at once and then spreading that cost over a number of years. From my perspective, we should have had a more prescribed process, and I'm not, again, just trying to disparage the mayor's position, because it was a very unique direction that she gave to our staff, and they followed it completely. But maybe I'm just old school. And all the private sector jobs and all the charities I've worked with, you look at your finances and you say, okay, we're going to raise our finances by 3% this year. And you're going to have to raise this amount of revenue to offset those costs. I prefer that type of mandate where we say to our staff, okay, we're looking at 4 to 5%, and if you need to go over that, you better come in with a really good reason why you need to go over that. And that's what I have been used to. And so that's why I'm not disparaging any of my colleagues around the room. They will make their choice. They will be able to explain their choice to their constituents, and I will make my choice, and I will simply oppose this budget. But thank you. And sir, I would be neglected if I didn't thank the chair. I was in that chair last year. It is an enormous amount of work. You have no idea how many sleepless nights you have in that chair. And to Vice Chair Maureen Wilson, you did a most admirable job with some very challenging things that we've placed before us. So thank you very much for your service.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. On our speakers list is Councillor Jackson, followed by Councillor Wang, Councillor Francis, Councillor Spatafora, Councillor Kassar, and Councillor Beatty. Councillor Jackson, please.
Thanks, Budget Chair Danko. And unlike some, I'm going to maintain the high road, and I won't use any unsavory remarks towards any of my colleagues, wherever their positions are. I want to thank you, Budget Chair Danko and Vice Chair Maureen Wilson, for your guidance during this very unique and different budget process, and Mayor Horvath coming up with some novel, unique ideas to try to help mitigate the tax increase that we're facing today, which basically is the same as last year at 5.8%. Budget Chair Danko, I believe strongly in public service. In fact, every election, when I run into voters that are looking for budget cuts, that are looking for a reduction in their taxes, I've told them if they want a tax fighter, don't elect me. I've actually said that to people at the door because of how strongly I believe in public service and both the front line especially, as well as the guidance and leadership, that senior leadership team, starting with the city managers of past and current now with our new one, provide our community. Budget Chair Danko, there's 4 reasons why I cannot support this budget. Number one, consistency. If I didn't support 5.8 last year, I can't support the 5.8 again this year. Secondly, the reserves being used. Look, I'm not going to say that in the past years reserves weren't used, but to my recollection and memory, it was as a very last resort towards an end of a budget process where we were stuck at a number and we wanted to get to a certain number, and then we asked both the general manager of finance of the time and the city manager to tap into a reserve, and that was just once in a blue moon, sincerely. And so the level of reserves here, the 60 million approximately a year, obviously, ultimately is unsustainable. That's my second reason. My third reason, it doesn't matter how it is described. The 5.8% is not the same across our community. It's the average assessed, market value assessed home and property, again, Budget Chair Danko, is based on $386,000. And it's going to work out to close to $300 a year on that average. Now, I know MVA hasn't been reassessed for about 7-8 years now, but in all likelihood, Ford's going to bring that in either 25 or 26. But even at the current level, you tell me where in Hamilton you can get a home for an assessed value of $385,000. It's almost unthinkable. And so my point being, the nearly $300 a year on that average assessment of $385,000, if your home, and let's call the average across the city, I would speculate is $600,000, $700,000, $800,000. That's easily doubled, and now a homeowner's looking at $550 to $600 a year if this budget is approved. And lastly, Budget Chair Danko, I was disappointed my global budget request failed on a 9-6 vote. I was hoping that the new city manager with fresh eyes, fresh ears, would have been given one last chance to huddle the senior leadership team and see if there was opportunities to further reduce the level of increase we're sitting at right now. I'll be honest, I have felt rushed in this budget process, and I think part of the rushness, I feel, is because for the first time we've collapsed the operating with the capital. And so obviously if a budget is not approved today, capital budgets that normally would have been out to tender in early January with past historic practices of trying to approve a capital budget before Christmas would have been out to tender in early mid-January. Often favorable tenders came in, money saved to the taxpayers, and most, if not all, projects every year were completed. But I get the fact now that with the collapsed and combined of what we're dealing with today, hence the rushness of making sure we're not holding up capital projects. So we may want to, at least as one member of council, we may want to revisit the combined aspect versus the separations of the past. Our ability, I will continue to stress, Budget Chair Danko, our ability to pay in our community is nowhere near the average or as high as our neighbors to the east and west and to the southwest around Kitchener-Waterloo. Nowhere near the ability and affordability to pay. So I'm constantly keeping that in mind as well. And I worry that if these increases continue at this level, coming out of a council term where we average 2.5% a year, and for some members of council that want to constantly resurrect the past, I'm glad they do it because I'm very proud of past councils I have served on, especially since amalgamation. Our city of Hamilton has been on a zenith, Budget Chair Danko. If you haven't noticed the migration from the GTA in the last 10, 15 years that's come to our city, it's because of quality of life, value of what the taxpayers are getting at the time, reasonable increases, waterfront development, good library system, parks, playgrounds, rec centers, arenas, good emergency services. My goodness, I've said the last 10, 15 years, I guess some people maybe haven't been around the city that long, that it's like the world has discovered Hamilton in the last 10 to 20 years. And we did that in past councils, including last term, with reasonable rates around the rate of inflation increases, mindful of the ability to pay and affordability to our taxpayers. So, Budget Chair Danko, it's with some regret again that I'm usually and have been, my record over the last 30 plus years, except for last year and now this year again, has been one that I've sacrificed, I've compromised, and where I felt we've landed by a strong majority, if not unanimously, in the past years on council at a reasonable, underline the word reasonable rate of tax increase to keep public service flowing in this municipality and not put our homeowners on the potential brink of not being able to stay in their homes. Unfortunately, last year and this year, I cannot be that team player and cannot support this budget, regretfully. Thank you, Budget Chair Danko, for your indulgence.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. On our speakers list, Councillor Wang, followed by Councillor Francis, Spadafora, Kassar, Beatty, McMeekin. Councillor Wang, please.
Thank you, Chair. I want to echo some of the same comments that Councillor Jackson has said, especially when seeing how Hamilton has grown in the last 10, 15 years. At the time of amalgamation, I asked ChatGPT this question, actually. What was the city of Hamilton's population in 2001? And ChatGPT tells me that as of the 2001 census, the population of the city of Hamilton was approximately 490,268. 490,000. Today, based on the census of 2021, we are looking at 570,000. That is almost a population growth of almost 100,000 people in just a short span of 20 years. And because of this, we're also seeing that the provincial estimations of the city of Hamilton is that it will be growing to 820,000 people by 2051. I think that those numbers are very indicative of how attractive Hamilton is. But with Hamilton being as attractive as it is, we also have an obligation and we absolutely have a responsibility to ensure that our infrastructure, our investments, our roads, our homeless are all in line with the expectations of this population growth. The unfortunate aspect is that we're having a hard time finding more partnership with other levels of government in order to see that that population growth has a detriment to our municipal infrastructure. So we have a responsibility as governors to ensure that we are making timely, fiscally prudent investments that are in line with the population growth. And of course, we're also being mindful that the City of Hamilton residents do not have the same disposable income as other municipalities. But we are still, as we have seen time and time again, out investing at different portfolios like our homelessness, like our mental health, We are doing the lion's share of those investments to ensure that the City of Hamilton's community and residents at all different vulnerable and marginal populations are being supported. So in line with that, I am thankful to this council again for the amount of work that we have been collaborating on and trying to find opportunities for compromise and trying to find opportunities to still fulfill council's strategic priorities while also being prudent fiscal managers of the very finite taxpayer dollars that we have. So in that vein, I will be supporting this budget. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wang. Speakers list, Councillor Francis, followed by Spatafora, Kassar, Beatty, and McMeegan. Councillor Francis, please.
Thank you, Budget Chair Danko. And this is, excuse me, this is yet again a record tax hike that Hamiltonians simply cannot afford. This is an irresponsible budget. I will never support these massive tax increases and record spending. We had an opportunity last budget meeting with Councillor Jackson's motion to have the new city manager present us with options to reduce this budget further in a significant way. I'm quite disappointed that council wouldn't even take a second look at this with a fresh perspective and a new set of eyes. Just Tuesday, I was at my local bocce club for dinner, and there were over 100 residents in attendance, mostly elderly folks. I spoke to nearly everybody at this event. Every single person said, please, do not raise my taxes. We're struggling, one by one by one. I've never seen anything like it before. My heart broke hearing all these stories of people struggling in my own community. And these are homeowners. These people pay these taxes. The number one question that they asked me, what more are we getting by paying these tax increases? They're not seeing the value of the tax increases. They're not seeing the increase of services. They're only seeing their taxes go up. They're getting the same amount of roads fixed, same amount of infrastructure fixed, the same amount of parks fixed. And to say we're playing catch up is simply, it's not accurate. These massive tax increases are going to hurt the most vulnerable people in our community. They're going to hurt our seniors. They're going to hurt people with disabilities. They're going to hurt people on fixed income. And what concerns me the most about this, not only is this council going to pass back-to-back record high budgets, we're projecting 2 more future budgets just as high as this one, while depleting our reserves on top of it. So this is irresponsible, and I will not be supporting this crazy spending. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next on our speakers list, Councillor Spatafora.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep this as short as I can as your speakers list is growing. So first off, I want to thank all of our staff that worked hard on getting us here today, and everybody around this table, even though we're going to agree, disagree, whatever it's going to be, I think at least we did it in a somewhat cordial way. I won't be supporting the budget. I think there's opportunity to do things differently. And, sorry. Yeah, I lost my train of thought. Anyways, I won't be supporting the budget. I wanted to thank staff for all their hard work. And I just want to say I would never, ever tell any of you that your vote in one way or another is one thing or another. Vote how you wish. I'll vote how I wish. And at the end, it's just politics. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spatafora. Councillor Kassar.
Thanks, Chair Danko. I'd briefly like to take us back to where we started with GM Zagarik's report back in the summer at 14.2%. There's been lots of rhetoric around excessive spending and out of control spending. So a quick recap of what was in that report, because we are really in unprecedented times. Roughly 8% was related, of the 14.2% was related to provincial requirements and downloading. That includes Bill 23, other provincial legislation like asset management legislation, and the housing and homelessness crisis, which the city is choosing to fund because it needs to happen and will only get more expensive if we don't deal with it. 4% was roughly 4% was salaries and wages for unionized and non-unionized employees, collective bargaining obligations, benefits, merit increases, because we were presented from staff a report that we were underpaying our employees, and we had a huge recruitment and retention problem, and that was affecting service levels. So there's talk about what are we providing in terms of service. You need to have employees and professional staff to be able to do that. So we're already at 12% of things that are largely out of our control and are required in order to run a professional corporation and to provide service to our constituents. Then roughly 3% was made up of things like capital investment. So we are budgeting roughly 1% to catch up, just under 1% to catch up on the underinvestment that has happened for decades, because we can't keep our roads in good condition. We can't keep our rec centers in the condition that people expect. We don't have enough of all the things that people want. So we cannot expect to continue to underinvest and still provide the services that people need. It costs money, and it's up to us to communicate that. So if anyone wants to collaborate on communication, I'd be happy to do that. I made the offer before. It is still open. In addition, emergency services needed to grow, including police, fire, and EMS. So those are essential services that everyone needs. And when we talk about headcount, you know, our transit, since the beginning of this term, we've added at least 44 heads for transit growth, part of our 10-year transit plan. Long-term care, last year we added 40 heads. That's important. There's been lots of talk about how important long-term care is. Paramedics, we needed to add 35, and Chief Sanderson had indicated how the code zeros had reduced significantly and service levels had improved. That's important. We added 29 police last year, uniform and non-uniform, and operating impacts from capital. We need to deliver capital. That takes staff. That was 21 headcount. I know Bill 109 has required additional staff because of provincial changes in order for us to hit deadlines and not be penalized and have fees refunded. You know, Nick Winters talked about adding, I think it was 13, 15 heads to save $3 million for locate services. So we're adding headcount to save money. So I have a real problem when headcount is thrown up as a problem, as something we need to correct for, because we're delivering value for the money that we're spending. So let's not lose sight of that. And just to bring it to where we are today, the report that was delivered in January spoke to the 2.6%. That's the province downloading of Bill 23, the 1.6% that is for the housing and homelessness crisis. Now, on that topic, everyone I talked to does not want to see people on the street, whether it's from a compassionate point of view or not so compassionate point of view. Everyone wants to solve that. That's what we're doing. We're investing to solve that problem. Forget about the fact that, you know, the personal part of it's unconscionable to allow people not to have the right of housing. But it's the right thing to do. And based on my math, we're roughly at 1.6% for everything else. So to characterize this as irresponsible and reckless spending is not putting effort into really understanding what's here, Chair Danko. So getting a little emotional, but I will fully support the budget. I think we've done a great job under the mayor's leadership, under staff leadership, and the work that many councillors did here to lower it even more, over 1% today. So fully supportive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kassar. Councillor Beattie, followed by McMeekin, Pauls, Alex Wilson, and myself. Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, echoing my gratitude to those around the table who have put in considerable effort to drive this number down. I do want to acknowledge the work also done by our city's incredible administrative team, continuing towards this new proposal of 5.79, basically mirroring last year. It's a much better position to be at than our starting point of 14 point whatever it was. But I didn't feel any of the elation that some of my other colleagues felt during this process, and I alluded to this earlier. And in fact, I felt quite the opposite. I felt a great deal of frustration and futility. Put a considerable amount of work into what I brought forward to contribute, and only came up with a measly 0.1% in savings. And I've been trying to reflect on this. And I can't help but feel that we're still at a point where we're picking the low fruit. And I represent Winona and Fruitland, so I can speak with some authority on this. That in my opinion, we can't keep doing this moving forward. Somebody needs to get out the ladder and go to the top of the tree. To echo the concerns of others who have spoken, yes, we've brought this increase down to 5.79, but what about next year? What about the year after? So I'm going to be voting in opposition to this year's number, but it's based largely on the fact that I'm completely dissatisfied and frustrated with this process. And I'm hopeful that as we continue to evolve as a new council, we can refine this process for the better. But I truly believe we've got to break out the ladder. We've got to go up. We've got to do things differently, or we're going to be back here again and again and again. And for me, that's not going to work.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McMeekin, followed by Councillor Pauls, Councillor Alex Wilson, and myself. Councillor McMeekin, please.
Thanks, Chair Danko. This has been a long and winding road, and one that we have, who was it that said the destination is the journey? I think there's some sense to that. My esteemed colleague to the left talked about people discovering Hamilton, and I get it. I discovered Hamilton politically in 1975. Those were the halcyon days, the strong industrial days when our assessment ratio was much closer to 50-50 than it is today. So we had a lot of flexibility back in those days to do some of the creative entrepreneurial things that we wanted to do, and we were able to take advantage of that. Today we've got to deal with the cards we've been dealt, not the cards we wish we had. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be focused on reshuffling the deck and making sure that responsibilities are more equitably shared, and that's an ongoing battle. Looking at, let me do the dark side first. Looking ahead, I'm worried. I think we're going to have some really important decisions to make around development charges, which are our major source of income. I want very much to see us, and I think the council has taken the position that that's our mission, to really enhance the industrial commercial side. The closer, every few percent we can up that makes us much more viable fiscally. So I want to just put that on the table, because when the development charge stuff comes in, my questions are going to be around our competitiveness and our sensitivity to that. Because the last thing we want to do is shoot ourselves in the foot. Anyhow, that said, I just going to the positive side of the coin. This projected tax increase, I'm told, will not impact our credit rating, which is still, I think, AAA plus or whatever. It's very high. And it allows us to do some of the things we want to do. I've used the phrase rainy day and with the tsunami around the way. Just imagine what this tax increase would have been like if we hadn't have chosen to go and use some reserve funds to do those really important things that we want to do. So in looking at that, you know, in reality, from the municipally generated side, we're coming in about 3.5%, well below the targeted 4% council set. And on the provincial side, I think it's been reduced to about 2.3%. And it should not be lost on anybody that 40%, 39.7% of our projected tax increase is provincially generated, 40%. You know, we need to talk about that ongoing as we get into partnership meetings and such. So I intend to support this budget. I'm thankful that council has engaged as they have in struggling to get things down as best they can. I think it's something that we can go to most everybody in the constituents we're privileged to represent with clean hands and straight eyes and say we really did do our level best to get it down. And I'm proud of the fact that council has done that. Would I like to come in below 5? Sure, who wouldn't? But we get the same criticism at 4.9 as we're probably going to get at 5.8. And I think 5.8 is responsible. I'm particularly enamored of the comments that Councillor Kassar made. And I just want to say for the record, because this came up at a community meeting, the question, stripping away any long preamble, was, what the hell are you doing on this homelessness front, you know? And my response was, I hope you didn't elect me to be your counselor thinking that I would vote to let people die on the streets. That's not the community that I live in, want to live in, or I suggest respectfully that you want to live in. And the person nodded and said, you know, you're right. And so I think we've done a good job of trying to balance that, building the strong, caring, compassionate city that we want. Much more to do. I agree. We've declared so many crises around this horseshoe that need work, and we'll get at it. We'll do it. It'll come. No one wants to be led by a pessimist. We need to be optimistic about it. So I support the budget and look forward to chance to share that with the constituents I'm privileged to represent.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pauls, followed by Councillor Alex Wilson, and Maureen Wilson, and myself. Councillor Pauls.
Thank you. And speaking right after Councillor Ted, he said the things that I was going to say, but I want you to know that when a resident calls me or emails me, I always call them back. And after I talk to them for a little while, they understand the situation we're in. So it's worth noting, and of this 5.79, only 3.2 of it represents our city's generated tax increase. With the remaining, like it's been said, 2.4 now being linked to provincial wave development charges that we really upon for funding proper infrastructure growth. But I want to say that I'm sure and I hope that the province and the federal come to rescue some cities because we need help. So really, comparing to last year's apples to this year's apples, and I'm not a farmer, the city generated tax, peaches, generated tax increase of 3.2 is smaller than last year's 5.79 increase, which I ultimately supported and do not want to exceed this year. I remember talking to a few of my councillors, even the mayor, that I said I really would love to stay where we're at or go under. And I want to commend the mayor. She worked so hard. I know she has a lot of burden. I mean, she's the head of council, and she's worked so hard. So in obtaining constituent feedback, like I said, during the budget season, the message I have heard also, the constituent, I think they need the balance of affordability with value. And like Councillor Kassar said, some of the calls are, they're homeless. We have to help them. We have to help them. And maybe this is the way we're going to do it. They do not want to see infrastructure and service decline only to kick the can down the road when it will cost us much, much more to catch up. Ultimately, since we have come down from 14.2 to 5.79, I now deem this is a fiscally responsible budget, and I will support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pauls. Councillor Alex Wilson, followed by Councillor Nan, Councillor Maureen Wilson, and myself. Councillor Alex Wilson, please.
I really appreciated both Councillor McMeekin mentioning some of the values that we took here when we got elected, and I do just want to echo Councillor Cassar's comments and just want to thank him in particular right now and some of those remarks, I think, for continually throughout, no matter where engaging in this process, bringing the facts, bringing the numbers, bringing your expertise from private industry into this. I think we've all brought that, but I just, in particular, I think in this conversation, I want to thank you, Councillor Cassar, for continuously reminding us what's in the budget in front of us and having those facts ready at hand. I think it speaks clearly about the amount of work and review that's been done. And back to Councillor McMeekin's comments about kind of connecting back on the doors and bringing that forward and what are the visions and values that we were elected on here. One of the things that I often speak about as one of the younger members in the room, one of the newer members in the room, as it's been pointed out, is what is the legacy that we're leaving not just next year, not within this term, but hey, could we think even 5 years in the future, 10 maybe, 20, because I'll be here. I know our children, future generations of this city will be here. We just talked about over 100,000 new residents being here during that time period in addition. And so I appreciate that we have to balance affordability with what we're actually putting forward. But I hope that's what we're doing, is we're balancing affordability with what we're actually putting forward. Because I've heard a lot about how this can't go on, and I want to be really clear. Of course it can't. We have every municipality in Ontario clamoring for a new deal. The Canada, the country we live in, is on fire with unprecedented wildfires. There's never been less satisfaction, less trust in government. Of course this can't go on. So are we going to be part of the solution? Are we going to show what a leadership looks like? Are we going to say this is how we can move out of these problems? Are we going to put our head in the sand, kick the can down the road, say, oh, that's another level of government's responsibility, without giving them the tools, without saying this is what these solutions are we need? So I think leadership needs to be active in times of crisis. We need to say, this is not the best plan, this is not the plan we want to put forward. This is the plan within the jurisdiction we have today that we think is the best we can get. This is our best vision. Is it perfect? No. Do we have a constitution in this country that allows municipalities to put forward perfect budgets with revenue sources? No. And so as Councillor McMeekin said, we also have to draw out and draw attention to those pieces. But I want to be really clear that by investing in filling the gaps, and I think it is accurate to say we are filling gaps. I heard earlier that it's inaccurate to say that. I want to be really clear. In my ward, in Ward 13, the community I live in, there are gaps due to underfunding. There are services that will be taken away if we do not, even within this, if we do not find ways to invest to repair the assets we have, let alone build new for growth. And so I really appreciate the efforts that have occurred here today to focus on the problems our community is facing, not just today, but to set ourselves up for success in what is going to be not the next 3 years of this term, not the term after that, but at least the next 3 decades of work. That's the legacy we're starting today. That's the legacy we're building. We are showing other cities, we are working with other cities, we are working with other governments, not just in a North American context, but in a global context. We are taking on challenges in new ways over what will be the most dynamic and challenging decades of world history. I am proud of the efforts we're doing, but I also want to thank folks for staying on task and thinking about what are the challenges we're facing in Hamilton, how we're dealing with homelessness, food security, affordability, what are the services our community can rely on in these difficult times, and how are we ensuring they're there for them when they need them. I want to thank folks for their efforts in building this budget, and I hope that we are able to pass a plan moving forward. I think it's an abdication of responsibility to not have a plan moving forward. So whether that's voting against the budget or voting for the budget, that's not what I'm talking about. But if this budget is voted down, what's the next step? Where are we going next? I think not having that roadmap, that's concerning to me. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nan.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you to the Mayor. Thank you to you as Chair. Thank you to Vice Chair Maureen Wilson. Thank you to our SLT team. Thank you to Corporate Finance, the entire staff who have demonstrated not only fiscal management, but also a deep care for balancing affordability with the investments that are necessary in order to ensure our neighborhoods are places where our people can thrive. As a council, we declared an affordable housing crisis. As a council, we declared a toxic drug crisis in our municipality. As a council, we declared mental health a crisis in our municipality, in part, like my colleague across the table who championed a lot of those declarations, as a calling card to higher levels of government to show up to the table to make sure that the cost of addressing those crises are not borne on the backs of our taxpayers. It is absolutely inappropriate and regressive to expect taxpayers to cover human crises. It is necessarily the mandate of the province and the feds. Meanwhile, city council after city council from one municipality to the next across Ontario and across this country are finding themselves in the exact same position that we are in, which is necessarily needing to stand up to care for our communities and invest in record numbers. That has never had to happen before in previous terms of council over the last several decades, as our veteran councillor pointed out. We haven't had to invest in affordable housing, homelessness solutions to the degree and the magnitude that we're doing now. The game has changed. The era is different. We are at a place where complete systems of social support are at the brink of collapse. And I think we have to hold that truth here because that's the tension, right? That's the part that makes this so difficult because as elected representatives, each and every one of us, I do not deny for a second that each and every one of us doesn't want to care for our community. I see nothing but care around this table. But the only way we can demonstrate our value, our governing values, is to invest in the solutions that are needed. Are those hard choices? Heck yeah. Are they necessary ones? Yes. Why? Because when we pick up the mantle of leadership and demonstrate what is possible, then we invite the province to the table. Then we invite the feds to the table to not only take a photo with a shovel in their hand or a ribbon with a pair of scissors, but to show that this municipality is capable of holding the complex reality of the crises that are compounding our neighborhoods and show another way forward. So until there's a new fiscal framework coming from the federal government, backed by the province, and giving municipalities what we necessarily need in order to invest in the vitality, health, and thriving capacity of our communities for generations to come, until then, folks, every year is going to be a tough conversation. It's going to require us to lead. It's going to require us to have this difficult conversation with our communities when the income level has changed so much. Right? So as much as, yeah, we have an affordability issue, and Hamilton's not different than any other community in Ontario. In fact, we're faring pretty well. 2015, our average income was $87,000 citywide. In 2020, we're at $108,000. Ward 3 is $54,000 in 2015. In 2020, it's $73,000. Ward 14 over here, faring really well. Back in 2015, $95,000. What's the average income in my councillor colleague's ward over here? $184,000. Over there on the mountain in Ward 6, used to be $85,000. Now it's $101,000. There's a significant $20,000 income uplift that is in our community, partly by the 100,000 new people that have come in and chosen our communities, partly because of the economic development and the investments that are happening and the jobs that are being created in our city, partly because this leadership is continuing to provide the reality that Hamilton is a city of choice. It is a city of choice, and we get the honor of making the decisions to keep that going forward. So thank you, everybody, for your financial management, for your prudence, for everybody who brought a solution to the table. I really appreciate those of us and all of the folks around the table who did do that extra squeezing, because I think that juice, regardless of how many drops, was worth it. Every single drop was worth it, Councillor Beattie, because it shows that that work is a payoff. It's a lot of work, but it's okay. We can do it when we're doing it together. And so again, just thank you so much to everybody for your collaboration. I think we've ended somewhere where we can all be proud of. I can definitely, certainly back up the decision that majority of this council hopefully will make today in setting our tax levy impact rate this year, and continue to champion it for multi-years going forward, because Hamiltonians deserve a community they can thrive in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Maureen Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Danko. It's always a challenge following my Councillor Nan. First of all, let me state what is necessary from my part around this table. First of all, thank you to Mayor Horvath for entrusting both you and I with trust and confidence in trying to lead this process in a different way. It's always hard that first time. But to my colleagues, not once did she flinch, not once did she second guess us. She was absolutely, completely professional, and very much support. Appreciate that support. And to my wingman, Councillor Danko, for your consistent level leadership and pragmatism, thoughtfulness, quick on your feet. Very much appreciate that. Thank you. For me, this is a story of 3 basic chapters, or 3 volumes. This budget is a story of unfunded mandates. This is a story about a federal and provincial government who are falling behind on their commitments and then leaving the dirty dishes at our door. And this is a story also about a council who is acknowledging that those dishes are piling up while some residents are going hungry and unhoused. And this is a council who had a choice to make. We can ignore the dishes, we can just blame the waiter, or we can make it a priority collectively to say we have a choice here, but it requires resolve and it requires investment. And similar to Councillor Meekin's always wise words, I think we chose the right path, and we chose to invest. We chose to lead. We chose to take on that responsibility. Respectfully, I will never cast shade on previous service, but the 3rd volume in this budget is one of ignored investment that has now costing us more. And that, to my colleague right across the way, Councillor Alex Wilson, we can no longer afford to put off those investments and keep pushing it off onto his generation and my children's generation. Because what happens is when you underinvest, and councils up and starting at amalgamation did, and I'm going to say that, and your asset management plans are going to show that. You are adding to the costs for future generations, and you're getting less for what you're paying for. And you're on this hamster wheel. Well, what are we getting? Show us the value. We're just taping this thing together right now, folks, because we don't have the money to do the work. And the more tape you apply, the more it costs to do the repair, because the infrastructure is collapsing. So this is about a system that is collapsing. It's about a housing system that's collapsing. It's about infrastructure that's collapsing. But it's a story also of collaboration and leading. And respectfully, if you're looking for elation at this point in your service, you're probably always going to be disappointed. This is about hard work. There's many days around this table where you never feel fully satisfied. There are some good ones. And if you want to take that ladder and get to the top of the tree, go for it. But in a world of unfunded mandates, you're going to be cutting into the flesh of that peach. You're going to be cutting into swimming lessons. You're going to be cutting into how many roads we can get to. You're going to be cutting into water quality improvements. You're going to be cutting into efforts to try and enhance our tree canopy. These aren't This is not an exercise in trying to fuel and fund an amorphous mass. It is about community. And in the absence of doing that, we are underselling, underinvesting, and we are hurting community. So unless and until we get senior orders of government to realize the importance of community, which is fundamentally about people, that we're going to continue to have hard choices to make, but let us always choose to be on the side of the most vulnerable. Let us always choose to be on the side of smart, intentional investments that create wealth. Let us always choose about preparing this city so it continues to become more attractive to those who have to move here because they're squeezed out of somewhere else, want to move here, and then when they get here, they're always going to say, God, I'm glad I'm here. So those are the comments that I've offered. I would also like to express my deep appreciation for the work that was done by my colleagues in helping us get to this point. Passing on taxes is probably going to be the least happy part of our job. There's never going to be satisfaction on this. But satisfaction comes from knowing you put in the work and you did your best. And thanks to everyone around this table for your work, particularly those who worked hard on getting those motions to the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. If you could take the chair.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Just a few closing comments from myself. I really appreciate the discussion and the work and the effort that each and every one of council put into this, but in particular, very, very much appreciate the work that our staff has done behind the scenes. It has been since September, when staff were provided with the mandate by the mayor to utilize every efficiency, every reserve account, debt financing, every option in order to bring this budget down. Staff have been working nonstop on that. Being involved with this process behind the scenes again, seeing all of the fantastic discussions, the questions, the answers, the requests for more information that have been ongoing since we started this budget process back in January. It's been, extremely I don't want to say rewarding, but gratifying to be a part of that and see the effort that has gone into where we are today. The overall City of Hamilton tax-supported budget is $2.4 billion. This is this term of council's first budget that we are entirely responsible for. And a lot of times today, when we're at the end of the budget process, the discussion is focused on what's the number, where are we, how can we cut that? But really, everything that's gone into this budget is the decisions that each and every one of us has made throughout this past year. That's what this budget is based on. Our starting point in September of 14.2% levy tax increase through the mayor's leadership, that direction, that's the top of the tree. We have gone through this whole entire $2.4 billion budget to responsibly find as much leeway as we possibly could in order to mitigate the impact on taxpayers. There's nothing left. Every stone has been overturned to find savings. Over the past week, all the work, or past month, all the work that's gone into just finding those little bits of extra that are still left over. I can say with as much confidence as I can that realistically speaking, there's nothing else that we can take from that tree in order to further reduce the taxes on residents. If we look at our position right now, 5.79%, 1.59% of that is core city services. fixing the roads, picking up your garbage, recreation, parks. 1.6% of that is an unprecedented investment in housing and homelessness. We added $41 million between 2023 and 2024 to address the housing and homelessness crisis.
Yeah.
You think about the scale of that year-over-year increase. When we were talking about the stadium, I think the total city investment was like $45 million. Like, we just did that year over year because we had to do it, because there's people suffering in our community and they need the help that funding can provide. So, you know, back in December, I think it was, or the beginning of January, we did set a mandate through Councillor McMeekin's direction that the city component would be 4% or less. Well, even if you add together that 1.59 and 1.6 city core services and housing, we're at 3.19%. If you want to talk about rate of inflation, well, we are at the rate of inflation. Even those two numbers together, an unprecedented investment in housing and homelessness, we are still at the rate of inflation. And then, of course, there's the 2.6% increase from the province of Ontario. I think we're all extremely frustrated with that. We would definitely like the province to make us whole. I'm very hopeful that ongoing discussions and advocacy will bring in some additional relief on that front. But that's the reality that we're faced with as a municipality, has been, you know, very eloquently described by my colleagues. And just finally, you know, Councillor Alex Wilson brought up, I thought was a really good point. If I'm counting the votes right now, this budget is about a 50-50%, 50-50 vote. So what does happen if this budget doesn't pass? Are we going to sell golf courses? Are we going to start closing rec centers? Are we going to not fix the roads? Are we going to stop cutting the grass in the parks? Are we not going to fund homeless shelters and homeless services? What we have on the table is not just, you know, another motion, another, you know, thing that we debate as a committee, as council. This is our city's operational and capital budget. This is the services that our residents rely on every single day. This is our staff, their jobs, the amazing contributions that they provide to our city, to our community, and they're just you know, I can't express enough my appreciation for all our City of Hamilton staff and what they contribute. This budget is funding the work that they do. And as again was mentioned, the importance of our investments in our community. And my goal at the very beginning of this budget process was to get us as close to a unanimous vote as possible, trying to make the process as transparent, as open as possible, so that all those ideas could come forward in order to reach a final position where, you know, the vast majority could support it. So I am disappointed that we're close to a 50-50. But having said that, I'm tremendously proud of the work that we have done, each and every one of us, the work that our staff has done to get us to this point, and very proud of the mayor's leadership, starting this off, you know, back in September, recognizing where we could get to as a council to pass a budget that is as responsible as it possibly can be, and to maintain and enhance those services that our residents rely on every single day. So thank you, Vice Chair. I'll take the chair back. And I believe, Mayor Horvath, you have some closing comments?
I do. Thanks very much, Chair Danko. And I want to thank you, first of all, and Councillor Wilson, the Vice Chair of the Budget Committee, for taking us through a process that was breaking new ground here in our city. And thanks, of course, to all of our staff, the leadership team, the senior leadership team, our new city manager, all of the folks in the finance, as well as all of the other departments. You know, when we talk about our budget, our budget is about those people. And they're the ones that make the kind of conversations that we have around this table into reality on the ground with their various teams and their departments. And so I think it's really important to show gratitude to those folks. I'm not going to repeat all of the things that have been said, but I'm grateful. I have to say I'm very, very grateful for the conversation that has happened over these last couple of months. And particularly the one this afternoon. And I say that because I think that there are lots of commonalities in terms of our values and what we want to achieve as a city and what we want to see in terms of our programs and our vision for the future and our ability to meet the needs of the people in our city. I think everybody has a kind of a shared value around all of those things, but what I sometimes worry about is a lack of consistency around how do we get there. And hopefully this budget process has been a process that has helped us to have more of an understanding of the how do you get there piece. I think it's unfortunate when we have some language that's not very respectful around the table. I think we've done a pretty good job the last little while having these really tough conversations because they're really tough conversations. I think that everybody around here understands very well how tough it is for people. And notwithstanding income changes, which I think are important to identify, it's expensive out there. The cost of everyday living is hard for people. People are not able to make the same kinds of choices as maybe they were able to make a year ago. The situation around interest rates and particularly around mortgages and what that's done to folks is nothing to minimize. It's fairly significant. Also, I think we have to acknowledge that the challenges we have as a city will only be addressed if we put some resources towards them. And so finding that balance between the challenges that our residents and taxpayers are facing in their own household budgets versus the need to make sure that not only are we providing quality services for today, but setting the city up for success going forward, it's a balancing act. I think it's clear, it's a balancing act. And I think we've done our best to really strike that balance in this budget. I think everybody would wish the numbers were lower, but they can't be lower when we look at what the investments that we need to make are. And yes, I would say, as everybody around the table has, that those investments don't belong necessarily on our property taxpayers. They just don't. We are going to do everything we can to continue to advocate that the other orders of government pick up their responsibilities, and that will help us have some breathing room. It's also, I think, important to note that those kinds of services that we are stepping into the breach to provide, particularly around housing and homelessness, which is a significant investment, they really don't belong on a property tax base. They belong on a income tax-based system. That's where they belong. The property tax base is not a progressive tax, it's a regressive tax. I think everybody around here knows the difference. Progressive taxation takes into consideration your ability to pay. Property taxes don't. And I think that's one of the things that members around this council table struggle with, particularly when we have an aging population. I think that that's another thing that we need to be cognizant of. But in saying all of those things, I think it's pretty clear that we did strike the balance that we needed to strike. And I know there's a lot of conversation around the reserves, and I really appreciate the comments around the table in that regard. We always say, cities aren't allowed to run a deficit. We're not allowed to run a deficit. Neither are we allowed to run a surplus. So when we get to the end of a year and there are funds left over, guess where they go? Into reserves, which is where they should go. And then once in a while, there's going to come a time when when we need to utilize those reserves to help us get through a budget period that is more difficult than we've experienced, in the that I can even remember. I don't remember ever having to see the kind of investments that we are having to make in some of those programs. I mean, I don't really want to center out any organization or effort. There are lots and lots of pressures, whether it's housing, whether it's transitional housing, whether it's food banks, whether it's all the services that we have to support people. They're not getting what they need from the other orders of government to provide those services. And so we're doing that work. We're doing that work. We can't not do that work. We certainly hear from our constituents that they want to see some support for folks who are struggling. And I think it was Councillor Cassar that talked about some people see it one way, others see it another way. But at the end of the day, everybody wants to see some progress, and so do we. But that doesn't come without investment. And so I want to say that the ask that I made of staff around the budget directive was one that tried to really look at things from a holistic perspective in terms of what are our reserves like, what are our pressures like. We know that the first budget outlook was 14.2, and here we sit today at 5.8, taking care of a lot of the things that we know need to be taken care of. We ended up with Councillor McMeekin's 4% ask at 3.2, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. 1.6 of which is housing and homelessness. If that wasn't there, we would be at 1.6 because that's all of the other city services. And then there are the pressures that the other orders of government, particularly the provincial pressures, that come to the table at 2.6. So when we talk about, further cuts, I don't know what you're going to cut when really the city expenditure is 1.6 unless you cut out the housing, and I think it's pretty clear that we can't do that. So I could probably talk a lot more about all of this, but I'm not going to, except to say that I appreciate the commitment around this table to have these hard conversations. I appreciate the folks who are going to be supportive of the budget, and I also appreciate the folks who can't see their way to do that. At the end of the day, we have an obligation to meet the needs of the people of the city of Hamilton. I think we've balanced out that pressure against their very, very difficult financial times. And I look forward to being able to talk about some of the investments that we made and show people where it is that their money has gone. I'd also like to say that the narrative is not always an easy one. It doesn't help if we have a fractured narrative. So I would just hope that as we go forward, we're thoughtful about our broader responsibilities as elected councillors around a collective table that has come to a decision, hopefully, in favor of a budget today, because it's not helpful when there's a discourse that's not reflective of the desire of the majority of councillors, hopefully, who needed to dig deep and pass a budget. And so for all of those comments that people have made, I'm grateful. For all of the effort that has been put in, I'm grateful. We're going to continue to do that work to try to reduce impacts going forward. I just want to assure folks that when we looked at the strategy for this particular budget, we did look at places where we hadn't had to look before, but we did so in a very responsible way, maintaining our credit rating, as well as with a plan to replenish the reserves. And so I think that's really important to acknowledge as well. So on that note, thanks everybody for the work, and look forward to seeing whether or not we have a budget to pass, or that will be passed at the end of today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So no further speakers, so we're going to call the question. Item 7.1, the 2024 tax-supported budget and financing plan as amended, moved by Mayor Horvath, seconded by Vice Chair Maureen Wilson. All in favor, sorry? On the balance as amended. All in favor or opposed? That carries on a vote of 10-6, and I'm just going to ask that we leave that for a second, as members that are watching the live stream often comment that they didn't catch the vote. So next on our agenda, I believe we're going to adjourn this meeting, and then we have an hour break.
So through
Go
the
ahead.
chair, we think that we can maybe get it done in half an hour?
Half an hour, okay. So why don't we say it's almost 3 o'clock now, we'll come back at 3:30.
So sorry, I believe that's good? Okay, great.
And staff do need that time in order to update everything that we've just passed to put into the final. Yeah. So motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Cretch, seconded by Councillor Alex Wilson. All in favor? And that carries. We'll reconvene with council, special council at 3:30.